News, Britain's news channel.
One local cricket team was made up entirely of one family, the Jollands.
The Newmarket midweek seconds played Thurlow and Old Mill Greenian seconds, captained by, here we go, James Jolland. He played alongside family members Henry, Freddie, George, Jack, Archie, Ryan, Brandon and Daniel. Even if slightly controversial, one of the umpires was a Jolland to Stephen the umpire.
Yes, well, the Jolland family mostly live in Wickenbrook in Suffolk and have played for 4 years for Dullingham Village team before it merged with Newmarket. So that's the entire backstory. We're delighted to be joined now by Captain James Jolland and teammate and brother Nick Jolland. Really good to see you both this morning. This is incredible. How did you get the entire family involved in cricket?
Well, we started the club about 3 years ago, and it was more friends and family. But then it had this opportunity of this week to get everyone involved because everyone was back and they all played cricket, various levels, and the youngest being 12, George. And we're all available, so we thought 1 week we'd do the whole team.
You booted the friends out for 1 week only?
Yeah, they were very good about it. They come and watched. They supported us.
How did the other team feel about having an umpire with related ties?
Well, the captain of the Thurlow is one of our friends. We do know him, so he was fine with it, and there was no controversial decisions at all.
I think it's a fantastic strategy.
No, yeah.
You could plant somebody.
That's the way
in a position of authority. It's a great idea.
Oh, look, here's the scorecard we can see on the screen with all of your names on there. Some fantastic English names on there. How does it get between the family members? Is it very, very competitive between you all?
As you get older, you work on that, don't you? And you keep that competitiveness out of it. And it's really to play with your sons. It's a great thing to do.
Yeah, it's a lovely
We've
thing
all
to
got
do.
sons in it. That's why we do it.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good morning, 9:30 on Thursday, the 1st of August, live across the United Kingdom. This is Britain's Newsroom with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
So riots took place in London and Hartlepool overnight as a 17-year-old is charged with murdering 3 girls in that awful Southport stabbing attack.
And was there a cover-up at the BBC? It smells like it, doesn't it? The broadcaster is under fire for continuing to pay Huw Edwards his £480,000 salary. Plus, we'll tell you about the pay rise, despite knowing he'd been arrested on suspicion of serious offences involving young children.
Donald Trump has got himself into a bit of hot water for questioning whether his Democratic rival Kamala Harris is Indian or black. He was speaking at a convention for black journalists. The White House has subsequently condemned his comments.
Oh dear, so much for the heatwave. Get your brollies out. Some thunderstorms are going to hit parts of the UK today after the country experienced its hottest days of the year. Maybe the downpour's already started where you are. Let us know.
Tell you, you'll be happy about that rain. The police.
Yes.
Because part of the reason we've had these riots for the last 2 nights, these hot, dry evenings, people are out on the streets.
Also turns people's heads a bit, doesn't it?
The heat.
And if you are listening to us on the radio, there's lots of you listening to us because the figures have come out, the quarterly radio figures have come out, and our figures in particular on GBNews, we're up 89%. So thank you very much for listening, and also thank you very much for watching.
Yeah, tell your mates. People think GBNews is just on the telly, but of course we're on the website, we're on an amazing app, and we are on DAB radio. Every time I get into a taxi, I say, can you just find GB News on your radio, please?
And it's often already there.
Well, it is, but sometimes it isn't. And by the time I get out, they go, oh, quite like this. I'm going to stick with it. So lots more of that, please. gbnews.com/your say for all your comments this morning. First, though, the very latest news with Sophia Wensler.
Bev, thank you. Good morning. It's 9:32. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. A 17-year-old boy has been charged with the murders of 3 girls after Monday's stabbing in Southport. 3 children, 7-year-old Elsie Stancoom, Alice Aguiar, who was 9, and 6-year-old BB King, were killed during the attack at a holiday club. 8 other children and 2 adults were also injured. Some remain in a critical condition. The teenager's also been charged with 10 counts of attempted murder, and he's due to appear at Liverpool City Magistrates Court later. The Prime Minister will meet police leaders today amid widespread protests following Monday's attack. Angry crowds Angry crowds took to the streets of Manchester, Hartlepool and London, with some declaring their support for Tommy Robinson, saying, "We want our country back." It's after false social media posts claimed the attacker was a Muslim asylum seeker who'd crossed the channel in a small boat. Cars were set on fire in Hartlepool while flares and bottles were thrown at a statue of Winston Churchill in London's Parliament Square. More than 100 people were arrested in the capital, while Cleveland police made 8 arrests, with more expected. The Culture Secretary will meet the head of the BBC today after it emerged Huw Edwards continued to be employed even after he was arrested on suspicion of serious offences. Lisa Nandy will question the corporation's boss, Tim Davie, after it was revealed yesterday that the former news presenter was first arrested in November. But despite the seriousness of the investigation, his employment continued until April. In a statement, the BBC said that at the time, no charges had been brought against Mr Edwards, and it was also aware of a significant risk to his health. It comes after he pleaded guilty yesterday to charges related to receiving indecent images of children during an online chat. There's uncertainty over the Bank of England's interest rate decision today, with some analysts suggesting improved inflation could lead to a cut. The base rate has been held at 5.25% since August last year, which is the highest level since 2008. But new data suggests the cost of living crisis is easing thanks to inflation cooling off. That's leading some to predict a cut today, but economists caution that other pressures, including wages, are still a concern for policymakers. A decision is due around midday, and we'll bring you that live here on GB News. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sophia Wensler, more in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Very good morning. This is Britain's Newsroom live across the UK on GB News with me, Bev Turner, and Andrew Pierce.
I'm afraid they're out again. Protesters took to the streets of London and Hartlepool following that appalling mass stabbing that resulted in the murder of those 3 little girls in Southport on Monday.
So angry crowds threw flares and bottles at the gates of Downing Street. Over 100 people were arrested. There were similar scenes in Hartlepool.
This comes as this 17-year-old male has been charged with 3 counts of murder and the attempted murder of 10 others, and he's just arrived in court. I think it's Liverpool Magistrates Court.
So we're going to be... we've got Charlie Peters there at the court, and hopefully we'll be talking to Charlie a little bit later. But obviously questions have been raised about what the cause of these riots are. We had commentators on this channel yesterday saying this is all because of social media, and there's no doubt that people being able to communicate with each other causes part of the... It organises a coordination.
And it was false news on the internet, but I still think the underlying problem has been years of simmering resentment over the impact of mass immigration on this country, the failure of social cohesion, the fact that some people no longer feel at home in their own community. They feel marginalised, driven out. That is not to justify for 1 second breaking property, smashing up people's homes, removing bricks from walls, torching police vans. And by the way, what were they doing? Hurling, protesting outside Winston Churchill's statue yesterday, one of the greatest patriots this country's ever seen. However, I still think that is the biggest part of the problem.
One person who often talks really intelligently about this topic is Catherine Burble-Singh. She is, of course, the head of the Michaela Community School. She has a very diverse population at that school, and she is a very strong advocate of British values and bringing people together under the same roof of British values and believing in this country, no matter where you were born or what your religion is. And she was on GB News last night. She was on Patrick Christie's show, Patrick's on Holiday, hosted by Mark Dolan. And this is what she said last night to GB News.
I often concentrate simply on the immigration issue, which is an issue, but it is also the case that our schools are teaching our children, and those children turn into adults. And if those children, whatever colour they are, whatever religion they are made to feel somewhat ashamed of being British, perhaps, given the way in which we teach our history curriculum and so on, then children, the children who become adults are not able to love their country in a way that I think will make us successful. Now, loving your country doesn't mean you cannot be critical of it. I am massively critical of our education system, but I...
Well, joining us in the studio is social integration expert Dr. Rakib Ehsan. Morning, Rakib.
Morning.
I think she speaks with such eloquence on this topic, Catherine Birbalsingh, and she talks with such fearlessness, because part of the problem is we haven't had a language where we've been allowed to talk about racial integration without being accused of being racists. Do you feel that that wheel is turning now, so that we can now say, come on, we have to have a frank conversation about multiculturalism and how it doesn't always work?
No, absolutely. I think that conversation needs to be had. That importance of having shared civic values, mutual obligations. And I think that without the presence of a common moral cultural standard, it's very difficult to sustain and cultivate social cohesion, especially in a society which is as racially, ethnically and religiously diverse as ours.
Having said that, what we saw in the last few days is unacceptable.
Absolutely.
The violence. And of course, one of the mums of one of the little girls who was murdered said, don't do this in my name, don't do this in the community's name. But the point I was making, that this resentment, this simmering resentment, I think, that you can feel in some communities, how do we address it? How do you roll it back? Is it too late? Is the damage done? You go to certain of our inner cities and it doesn't feel like Britain.
It's very difficult, but we have to remain as positive and optimistic as possible. I wouldn't be in the business of giving up, but I also understand the sentiment that we are nearing towards a very dark place, and I think we could see the disorders which are taking place in different parts of the country now. In terms of the public disorders we've seen, we have to be very firm in terms of making the point that respect for the rule of law is a cornerstone of British liberal democracy. But at the same time, politicians have to engage maturely with perfectly legitimate concerns over immigration, integration and identity.
Well, looking at the pictures here, this was outside 10 Downing Street last night, and what struck me, and of course there are some idiots here, of course there are causing a problem, it's totally unacceptable. But what struck me was the number of police officers there, how heavy-handed they were with these protesters, whatever you want to call them, agitators maybe is a better word. And yet you compare that to the footage in Harefield in Leeds, where there was Asian gangs setting fire to vehicles. The police just ran away. Can you explain that? Because maybe I'm imagining it, but that's what I see with my eyes, and that also inflames these tensions.
Well, I think it's Hare Hills in Leeds. And I think that the important point we have to make here is that our public institutions have to behave in the spirit of neutrality. And I think that also the language at times from the new Labour government, when it comes to talking about different kinds of disorder, there have been differences there in terms of the tone and the language. And I think it's very important that politicians and public institutions, such as police forces, they engage with concerns that certain groups in British society may well be the beneficiaries of preferential treatment when it comes to matters of law and order.
What do you mean about the language deployed by the new Labour government? They've only been in power 3 or 4 weeks. This is the Home Secretary you're talking about?
No, talking about the Home Secretary in particular.
Right, so
if you
what
see,
she said?
So I think that her statement when it came to the Southport riots, which were primarily caused by out-of-town troublemakers, I think that her language was robust, and I think rightly so. She talked about violent thugs essentially coming into Southport and being responsible for destruction of private property and also injuring 53 police officers. While I felt that her statement on the Hare Hills riots, where police officers were attacked, a police car was flipped over, a double-decker bus was set ablaze, I felt that she almost struck a more conciliatory tone.
Right.
Now, the background behind that was that there were children that were removed from a Romani family.
Yes.
So we have to appreciate the circumstances are different. But if you issue statements on public disorder and there are differences in terms of the tone and the language, it will tap into concerns that ultimately we have a two-tiered approach when it comes to policing and managing disorders.
I'm glad you used the expression about two-tier, because, of course, Suella Braverman got into a lot of trouble, didn't she, when she said there was two-tier policing over the Gaza protests, which we have in this great capital city, it seems, every Saturday. She thought it was they were being treated differently. Are we now having two-tier government? Because if the Home Secretary is saying one thing about a disturbance in Southport and one thing about a disturbance just a few hundred miles away in Leeds, That's more worrying, isn't it?
No, it is worrying, and I think the government has to try its best to adopt a neutral position to the best of its ability. I think that when
she'd have chosen her words very carefully.
No.
She'd have been advised by civil servants what she should and shouldn't say.
No, absolutely. And I think that Suella Braverman, she's no stranger to making controversial statements, but I think that she certainly made a point there. I think that in terms of the pro-Palestine protests, and I'm someone who firmly believes in the cause of Palestinian statehood, it's very clear that we saw a great deal of anti-Semitic chanting, the displaying of pro-terror paraphernalia as well, which undermines the Palestinian cause. But I felt like the policing response when it came to those kind of disgraceful incidents was somewhat weak, truth be told.
This phrase, far-right protesters, has been bandied around willy-nilly in the last 72 hours. So much of the mainstream media just, I think, lazily reaches for that trope. Does that have any real meaning in terms of this conversation about these people here? Would you say there is such a thing as a... Do they see themselves as a far-right political movement?
Well, I think it would be a mistake to dismiss perfectly legitimate concerns over immigration integration as far-right extremism. Now, we saw in Southport, for example, a local mosque was attacked. You could say that is traditional far-right behaviour. I think that's a fair point to make. I also think in the aftermath of the Southport riots, we did see anti-Muslim conspiracy theories being peddled over the identity of the suspect, who turns out to be a British-born teenager of Rwandan origin. Rwanda has a Muslim population of just 2%.
Yeah,
so I think
92% Christians.
Yeah, exactly. So I think we should be very firm in terms of addressing that far-right disinformation, calling out, and far-right behaviour. But I think the mistake that we would make is dismissing millions of people in the country who have perfectly legitimate concerns over immigration and the ability of newcomers to integrate into British liberal democratic values. That's not far-right in my view.
Yeah, because I keep hearing on other radio stations, it's the English Defence League. And should the English Defence League be banned? Tricky. Look for the English Defence League. They haven't got a website. I'm not even sure the English Defence League exists as an entity anymore.
Well, I think that prescribing the English Defence League is just a sticking plaster, really, isn't it? I think that what we have to do, we have to have a political establishment that addresses those concerns over living in a two-tier society, especially when it comes to matters of law and order. We need to have a more controlled immigration system. The chances of that at the moment are very slim. If truth be told. We also have a very dysfunctional asylum system, and I think I'd make this point that the Southport suspect being of Rwandan origin, even though being born in Britain, Rwanda, as you know, has a history of extreme violence.
Well, his parents fled here after the terrible genocide.
Absolutely, and I think actually you'll see that children of refugees and asylum seekers, there's a high risk of psychiatric disorders. So I think those are the kind of things that we need to explore. We want to have a very mature conversation about preventing these kind of horrific atrocities.
There's almost a theme there.
And if we take what Catherine Birbalsingh said at the start of the show about the fact that you have to proactively bring people together, and she does it over a shared set of values, that is not going to happen under this government. That's my worry. They are too frightened to say what are the shared set of values and what are the expectations of people in order to be British.
They also know where their votes are. Labour.
Right, thanks so much. Great to see you.
Nice to have you in the studio too.
Is it another cover-up by the BBC over Huw
yeah.
Edwards, the Culture Secretary, is talking to the top boss later this morning? We'll let you know all about it. This is Britain's Newsroom on GBNews.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. Are you comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister?
Which is it? Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Now, time for the best part of the show, our Greatest Britain, where we share amazing people who do amazing things. And this week, that is Dr. Leo Cheng and Reverend Hilary Cheng.
Well, Dr. Chen regularly serves as a volunteer surgeon aboard the Mercy ships in West Africa and has recently served his 17th mission aboard the ships. He volunteers with his wife, Reverend Hilary Cheng, a Methodist minister in the UK.
Thank you for joining us, and what a privilege. So just briefly explain, what are Mercy ships?
Well, Mercy ship provide world-class surgery on the ship, and the ship then sail to these poorest of the poor country because there's no infrastructure to get road or rail there. And we offer free surgery and also education, training of medical staff, and partner with the local or the host nation to build up their surgical and anaesthetic services.
So how long have you been travelling West Africa? You go on all these different ships, different ports, and you treat the needy and the vulnerable. How long have you both been doing this?
20 years.
20 years?
Just over 20 years.
And you take the time to do this out of your own holiday from work. Why do you do it?
Well, because I'm indebted to the education in this country with all the qualification I get. And NHS is great. I love the NHS because without NHS, we see cases that we see in the low-income country. And I want to make use of my hand to help those people who have no way of helping themselves. Because the tumours, the deformities, not just a physical ailment, but it's being ostracised and die early, commit suicide because they've been ostracised by their family.
When you're on the ship, you are seeing the very worst that the country can offer. I find it a great privilege to work alongside these people.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
(9:49). This is Britain's News, and we're GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
So is it another cover-up at the BBC? The broadcaster is at the centre of controversy after they continue to pay the presenter, Huw Edwards, a fat salary after he was arrested on suspicion of serious offences.
Well, you'll know he pleaded guilty at Westminster Magistrates Court yesterday to 3 counts relating to images of children and admitted to receiving 41 images on WhatsApp, 7 of the most serious kind involving children underage.
In a statement, the BBC said he would have been sacked if he had been charged while still working for the corporation. Well, former head of religion and ethics, Akil Ahmed, joins us now, former BBC head of religion and ethics. Good morning, Akil. I guess the BBC's defence is, you know, he was arrested, he hadn't been charged, he hadn't been found guilty of anything. We had an obligation under employment law to keep him on the payroll. Is there any case to answer there?
Yeah, well, I'm speaking purely in a personal capacity here now, and I think that's the problem they faced. I think until he got charged, he hadn't been charged when it was first brought to their attention, and you must remember the 2 cases are not actually the same. You know, what was going on before with regards to the young guy they was having a relationship with, or alleged relationship with, versus this. So when the police brought it to their attention, as they would have been, as they should have done, as their employer of Huw Edwards, they had to have at that point, he hasn't been charged with something. So you know, it would have been a very brave move to have actually sacked somebody when obviously he's not been, you know, that you haven't crossed that threshold. Once you have crossed that threshold, and because of the nature of the actual charges, then I think that's when he would have been sacked. And I think that's what they've said themselves. I think they're in a bit of a legal bind. When we look back at it now, it looks really bad, but the fact of the matter is, at that time, you don't necessarily know what he's been charged. He hasn't been charged with anything. They haven't given you exact details about what the allegations are. They've just let you know that he's under investigation for something which they think is serious. It's a very difficult process, and if you have to remember as well, at that time, they had a duty of care because he was going through the mental health issues as well. So it's an absolute mess. I think if you look at it like that, and I think if we try and look at this, you know, it liberally, what a mess. And a mess, you could argue that actually, you know, only Huw knows what was going on, and I think he's at the centre of all of this. And I think the BBC rightly will be asked questions But I think ultimately all of us would think, my God, you know, what a mess. It's not as simple as we'd like to think it was.
I get that, and I understand all the employment laws, Akhil, but the BBC is the public service broadcaster. I think it has to be seen to be in almost a higher place, perhaps, than others. But was it really appropriate to give this man a £40,000 pay rise after they were informed that he'd been arrested? £40,000? That's more than most people earn. That's way above the national average wage.
I mean, I think we have to just go back to that earlier point. I mean, the BBC is not above the law, though. That's the problem, you see. So actually, even as an employer, the BBC still has to apply the law as it stands. I think looking at this in isolation, I think questions will be asked about why he was paid that money. He obviously hadn't been charged at that point. That's the other thing that we need to remember. So the BBC was unaware of the charges. But you know, the contract that he has is the contract. I think it's a bit strange, personally. I think they could have had a conversation with him. And I think that's one of the things that I think they will have to answer as to why, when we knew there were issues with Huw at the time, why they would have actually implemented that. But I do also know from contractually, sometimes you're stuck with that £40,000 wasn't them saying, oh, let's give Huw a pay rise. It was probably a milestone that was reached in the contract that he had. And they, once again, were probably in a bit of a legal bind, although they may, I think with hindsight, probably say, we probably could have toughed that one out, and I think probably should have done.
OK, thank you. So interesting. Former BBC Head of Religion and Ethics, Akhil Ahmed, joins us there.
Just so much. So after he was arrested, he was paid £200,000 out of licensed payers' money. Remember, that's you, me and everybody watching.
With the pay rise?
Plus the pay rise.
I still find it amazing that somebody can be engaging in such sordid activity and nobody knows about it. How can nobody know about it? It's really shocking. Sharing
images on a WhatsApp with a paedophile known to the police.
Very odd. Right, still to come, AOP, it's Yorkshire Day. We're going to be paying tribute to the special day soon and a wonderful part of the country. Here's your weather with the whole country.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, very good morning to you. Welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast from the Met Office on what is, for some of us, going to be a hot, humid and thundery day. It is a bit fresher, more comfortable across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. Some outbreaks of rain here, but across parts of England and Wales, we already had some heavy thunderstorms overnight, and some of them are starting to clear away towards the east. But as we head into this afternoon, I am expecting some more heavy, thundery showers to develop, particularly across central and eastern parts of England. It is still going to be hot and humid, especially in the south. Temperatures in the high 20s, possibly low 30s. A bit more comfortable further north, but perhaps a bit warmer than it was yesterday. As we go through the rest of today and across Scotland, there will be a few outbreaks of rain, perhaps across some eastern parts, but further west, a drier and maybe brighter picture to end the day. A few spots of rain perhaps for parts of Northern Ireland, and across northern England, some heavy, maybe even thundery showers are possible, particularly towards the northeast. But it's across central, eastern parts of England where we're going to have the most frequent heavy, thundery downpours as we go through the second half of today. Watch out for some large hail, some torrential rain with perhaps 50 to 100 millimetres of rain in just a few hours, which is why we could see some impacts. There could be some further thunderstorms across some eastern parts as we go through the night and the early hours of tomorrow morning, but many places are going to actually have a largely dry night. Some clear skies, but it's still quite warm. It is still quite humid, and so another uncomfortable night for sleeping for some of us. More showers across the east first through tomorrow morning, but they will quickly clear away. However, more showers could then develop as we go into the afternoon, and again, some of these could be thundery. Further west, it's a drier picture until later on when a system comes in bringing some clouds, some wet and windy weather across parts of Northern Ireland and western Scotland. Temperatures are going to be gradually dropping, though still some high temperatures in the far east. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel. Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. On the Glasgow subway, the outer circle is suspended because of a faulty train. In East Yorkshire, the A164 is closed each way between Skibby and Bentley for an investigation. In Lincolnshire, the A57 is closed at Newton-on-Trent because of a burst water main. On the M53 in Cheshire, there's a lane closed southbound where someone's broken down just after junction 11 for the M56. There are queues from junction 14 at Helsby. Buses replaced trains between Stoke-on-Trent and Stockport because of overhead line problems. Some trains diverting via Crewe. On the M6 in the West Midlands, the northbound entry slip road at junction 9 from the A461 near Birmingham's blocked by a shed load. In Buckinghamshire, the A404 is closed each way along Amersham Road in High Wycombe for investigation. In Surrey, the A320 is closed along Chertsey Lane in Staines where we're stuck under the railway bridge. And in Bridgend, the A4093 is blocked by an accident on Great Terrace in Blackmill.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
You really could become the next big Great British Giveaway winner with your chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash to spend on anything you like. Listen to what some of our previous winners have to say about winning big with us.
On the day that I got the money in the bank account, everything just seemed a lot sunnier.
But I do have something to spend it on.
Just go for it. It's an absolute must.
Thank you, GBNews.
Amazing feeling to win.
For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2 or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled.
Lovely. Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your-say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family. 10 a.m. on Thursday, the 1st of August, live across the UK. This is Britain's Newsroom with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
The teenager charged over the Southport stabbing attack has arrived at Liverpool City Magistrates Court, flanked by a huge police convoy.
And of course, disorder has hit Britain. Protests took place across the UK overnight after the Southport stabbing attack. Mark White has the latest.
Well, the Prime Minister is going to host a meeting of Chief Constables at Downing Street this afternoon with some real concerns about the potential for a summer of disorder.
Cover up at the BBC seems like it, doesn't it? The broadcaster under fire for continuing to pay Huw Edwards his £480,000 salary, despite knowing he'd been arrested on suspicion of serious offences, and they even chucked in a £40,000 pay rise. Of course they did.
Donald Trump is in hot water for questioning whether his Democratic rival Kamala Harris is Indian or black at a convention for black journalists. The White House condemned the comments.
I'm not going to try and say it, so I'll just say, "Hey up!" It's Yorkshire Day, the annual awareness day promoting the UK's largest ceremonial county as a good place to be born, to live, to work and visit, is underway. Anna Riley is there.
Hey up and happy Yorkshire Day. Well, it may be raining here, but that's not dampening any spirits on the 1st of August for Yorkshire Day, celebrating everything that's fantastic about God's own county.
I love my Yorkshire tea. Do you know that? I drink nothing but Yorkshire tea. I'm a Lancashire girl anyway, but it doesn't matter. That's okay.
Well, I drink Yorkshire tea as well, actually.
Good, it's the best there is.
It is,
right.
by a mile.
Other teas are available before you get into trouble. Send your comments this morning, gbnews.com/your say. A lot to get through between now and midday. First, the very latest news with Sophia.
Bev, Andrew, thank you. Good morning from the GB Newsroom. It's just gone 10 o'clock. Your headlines. A 17-year-old boy has been charged with the murder of 3 girls after Monday's stabbing attack in Southport. 3 children, 7-year-old Elsie Stancoombe, Alice Aguiar, who was 9, and 6-year-old BB King, were killed during the attack at a holiday club. 8 other children and 2 adults were also injured. Some remain in a critical condition. The teenager's also been charged with 10 counts of attempted murder and is appearing at Liverpool City Magistrates Court. Announcing the charges, Chief Constable Serena Kennedy said the investigation is continuing.
A 17-year-old boy from Banks has been charged with the murders of BB, Elsie and Alice. 10 counts of attempted murder and possession of a bladed article following the tragic incident in Southport on Monday, the 29th of July. The 17-year-old cannot be named for legal reasons as he is under 18. Whilst these charges are a significant milestone within this investigation, this remains very much a live investigation, and we continue to work with our partners from Lancashire Police and Counter-Terrorism Policing North West.
Meanwhile, the Prime Minister will meet police leaders today amid widespread protests following Monday's attack. And angry crowds took to the streets of Manchester, Hartlepool and London, with some declaring their support for Tommy Robinson, saying, "We want our country back." It's after false social media posts claim the attacker was a Muslim asylum seeker who'd crossed the channel in a small boat. Cars were set on fire in Hartlepool while flares and bottles were thrown at a statue of Winston Churchill in London's Parliament Square. More than 100 people were arrested in the capital, while Cleveland police made 8 arrests, with more expected. Former police officer Graham Wetton told GB News misinformation is a growing concern.
A lot of false information being posted. People are reacting to rumour and innuendo, not fact. And then we're seeing the protests that escalate then into violence and disorder on streets across the UK. It's not just, in the actual location. Because information is so widely shared these days, you can understand the anger and the frustration, but to actually then take that into violence and disorder, I think is unacceptable in the circumstances and doesn't take into account the families or the investigation that has been mentioned is still actually live, albeit charges have been laid.
In other news, the Culture Secretary will meet the head of the BBC today after it emerged Huw Edwards continued to be employed even after he was arrested on suspicion of serious offences. It comes after it was revealed that the former news presenter was arrested in November but continued to be employed until April. In a statement, the BBC said that at the time no charges had been brought against Mr Edwards and it was also aware of a significant risk to his health. He pleaded guilty yesterday to charges related to receiving indecent images of children during an online chat. Former BBC executive Roger Bolton told us that many questions remain.
It's absolutely clear that BBC News and all the editors involved did not know until this week that Huw Edwards had been charged, let alone what he'd been charged with. And clearly, if you've watched all the reporting and reading the website of the BBC News has been reporting this top item, not hiding anything. However, the big questions remain about, we now know that the BBC executives were told in confidence that Huw Edwards had been arrested. When did they know he was charged? And the big question over all of this is why did they continue to pay him so much money in these circumstances?
Now, tensions are rising in the Middle East as Iran orders retaliatory strikes on Israel following the death of a top Hamas leader. Thousands turned out for the funeral of Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran, who was the terror group's most senior political chief. He was killed during a strike on the Iranian capital this week, which immediately raised fears of a broader escalation in the region. Both Britain's foreign and defence secretaries are in Qatar for talks aimed at quelling the tensions. There's uncertainty over the Bank of England's interest rate decision today, with some analysts suggesting improved inflation could lead to cuts. The base rate has been held at 5.25% since August last year, which is the highest level since 2008. But new data suggests the cost of living crisis is easing thanks to inflation cooling off. That's leading some to predict a cut today, but economists caution that other pressures, including wages, are still a concern for policymakers. A decision is due at around midday today, and we'll bring you that live here on GB News. And just as you thought it was time to enjoy summer, thunderstorms are expected to hit at any moment now. Yellow warnings are in place for much of England and Wales as the heatwave continues, but heavy showers, lightning and thunder will break the hot spells soon, with travel disruption and power cuts possible. Flood alerts are also in place in parts of the Midlands. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sophia Wensler, more in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
If we're looking a little smug this morning, there may be good reason for doing that. We're both a big fan of radio, aren't we?
Really big fans of radio.
And so it turns out that you are as well. So thank you so much. The latest radio listening figures are out, and GB News has done very, very well, particularly Britain's Newsroom.
Yeah, we're up 89%, so we're pretty pleased about that.
Yeah.
Breakfast has done very well too. They're up 60%, and we are whacking our rivals. They're trailing hopeless in our wake. So
shall we name them? Go on then. So GB News' audience growth was ahead of other news channels, including Talk Radio, LBC News UK and Times Radio. So I'm sure they're doing a lovely job. But thank you.
Never listen.
Thank you to you at home for supporting us on the radio, because what I love about GB News, and I just love this as a follower and a fan of GB News, is I'll have it on the telly, I'll be cooking the kids' tea, I've got the telly on in the corner, and then I have to go out of the house and do something else. You can carry on, just stick it on DAB in the car.
Yeah.
Genius. Or in your phone, listen on the apps. Brilliant.
Telling, because I use cabs a bit, and they've often got GB News on the radio.
Good. About time too. Right. Protesters took to the streets of London and Hartlepool last night following the mass stabbing which resulted in the murder of 3 little girls on Monday in Southport.
There were also disturbances in Manchester and Aldershot, and angry crowds threw flares and bottles at the gates of Downing Street. For some reason, they also thought it would be appropriate to attack the statue of Winston Churchill. No, I don't get it either.
As Andrew said, there were similar scenes across the country, and this all comes, of course, after this 17-year-old male has now been charged with 3 counts of murder and the attempted murder of 10 others. He's currently inside Liverpool Magistrates Court.
Well, GB News Home and Security Editor Mark White's with us. The disturbances, Mark, I keep hearing on these stations which don't have as many listeners as us, I'm pleased to say, that it's all about English Defence League. This is much more serious a problem, I think. It's not just a response to the shocking killings of those 3 little girls. But I think this is simmering resentment over years and years of the way people feel their local communities are not their local community anymore. They feel like strangers in their own community.
I think to brand these protests as far-right protests are a complete mischaracterisation, perhaps a deliberate mischaracterisation of what is going on here. Now, I'm not saying there weren't some far-right elements that attended some of these protests. There's certainly hotheads at these protests, as there are at pretty much every protest I've ever covered. There's always, from the left, from the right, Palestinian protesters, whatever. There are always elements in there that are looking to cause trouble, and sometimes they gain a critical mass and others get sucked into that and they can turn violent. But you're right, I think, to suggest that this has been simmering for years, a seething resentment of what is going on across the country, where they look at incident after incident that has been linked either to asylum seekers, to immigrants, or they would see as an illustration of the failings of multiculturalism. And also a feeling from the establishment that to talk about such issues as unpalatable as they might be, is seen as being somehow, far right, and people are sort of traduced for being concerned about perhaps legitimate issues.
I was going to say one other thing on that too. In so many towns and communities now, large hotels have been taken over by asylum seekers. Who agreed to that?
Yeah. Was
it just visited on high? Was it imposed by the Home Office? Did the local council agree? It's bad for business, I'm afraid. I was thinking of, I've got friends who've got a place in Hope, Brighton. The lovely hotel, it's a dump. It's because it's been an asylum seekers hotel for years and it's ruining the area.
And that's why at least 2 of the protests that sparked disorder last night in Newton Heath, in the eastern suburbs of Manchester, and also down in Aldershot, were outside migrant hotels. But the same type of resentment is feeding it. It's under this enough is enough banner that people are coming out. And yes, Southport, OK, we know now that there was false information put out there on the internet that people took in, and that did feed in and spark some of the anger. But it's very naive to think that it was just that and this misinformation about the individual suspect that has caused what we are seeing now. This has been building for years, and you rightly point out the issue around hotels. There's barely a community around the country that hasn't seen a hotel in their local area that has been requisitioned without their say. They have no say at all on what happens. It's an agreement between the hotel owners and these companies acting on behalf of the Home Office. They requisition these hotels. They're taken out of use, sometimes for years. Places where you could go and have a wedding, another function, business people and tourists coming into your community. Suddenly that ends. And on top of that, they see hundreds, mainly young men in these hotels, outside hanging about. They link them to criminality and such. So there is absolutely an issue there that needs to be explored. However, unpalatable many people might feel that it is.
Is anybody handling this story as well as GB News? I know that sounds like a strange question to ask, but I've been listening to lots of media outlets and lots of people that live in the Westminster bubble who just still look and just say lazy journalism, far-right thugs, they just don't like brown people, they're throwing bricks at the police. It is so much more complicated and nuanced than that, Mark. Are you still disappointed that the rest of the media hasn't caught up with looking at these people and going, what are they actually angry about? What are they feeling? Why do they feel so oppressed? It's not just about racism, I don't think. It's not that they are just looking at the brown person and saying, it's not fair, you get more than me. It's something else. It's about a sense of hopelessness. They feel like they've got no money, they can't get a house, they can't see the GP, the schools their kids go to are rubbish. There's a mass collapse of social fabric. And why is it that so few media outlets understand that?
Yeah, there's a societal disintegration that has been taking place slowly but surely over recent years. And you're right, it's lazy journalism just to brand this as far right. And it's also people with sensibilities that don't want to go down the road of actually, confronting some painful truths about perhaps the failure of multiculturalism in this country, that is too much of a risk for them to get sucked into. They don't want to. They want to avoid
being judged
so
for saying it,
they brand it in simplistic terms when it is a multidimensional issue that is complex, but it is real. And that's why we have senior police officers meeting in Downing Street this afternoon with the Prime Minister, because there is real concern about the potential for a summer of disorder. And while I think it's right to lend support to the police who have got a difficult time ahead, perhaps maybe our political class also need to come out and address the wider society and maybe tell them that we get it, we understand the pain that you're going through and the issues that you see in your society
and what worries me,
about the disintegration of your communities.
We've got to go, Mark. But what worries me enormously as well is this Labour government will sit down with their instincts for control and start to impose all sorts of restrictions on all of us. And that's what worries me as a reaction to these sorts of riots. Mark, thank you so much.
Now, coming up, the cover-up at the BBC at the centre of controversy after they continued paying the presenter Huw Edwards, who's colossal salary after he was arrested on suspicion of those serious offences against young children.
In a statement, the BBC said he would have been sacked if he had been charged while still working for the corporation.
Well, we're joined now by the political columnist for the Sun, Trevor Kavanagh. He was a bit of a political legend, certainly to me. Trevor, morning to you. The Sun newspaper, when it took on Huw Edwards last year by exposing the fact he'd paid a 17-year-old, excuse me, £35,000, was attacked from on high by people like Owen Jones, the Guardian columnist, David Jolland, a former editor of the Sun, all saying the Sun should be in the dock because an innocent man had been brought to the edge. Vindication for the Sun today. I wonder when we're going to get an apology from those left-wing agitators.
Well, I must say that I'm looking forward to the apology from my former editor, David Jolland, who I'm sure will be big enough to say that he was grotesquely mistaken and should have known better. The situation is that the BBC has known about all of the information that we published on Huw Edwards right from the beginning, simply because the parents of the young person who he gave huge sums of money to in return for indecent pictures went to the BBC first and gave them all the information that they would have required, and they were turned away and nothing was done. So they came to the Sun, and the Sun, I think with considerable courage, in fact, decided this was an incident that required coverage, and we put it on the front page. We did not name Huw Edwards at the beginning. That was done by his wife, who said that the man was having a nervous breakdown or some sort of depression or something, mental health issues. Now, none of this excuses the BBC for failing to do something right at the start, and not just about this particular incident that the parents reported, but about other incidents where he was approaching members of the BBC staff for similar sort of favours. And this was known within the BBC. So the idea that the BBC came to this innocent and with wide eyes, I think, is for the birds. And they have a big case to answer on their failures to deal with an issue which I think has had previous track record with other characters like Jimmy Savile.
What can the BBC learn from this, Huw, going forward and making sure that presenters aren't conducting themselves in this manner in the future?
Well, I think the very first thing they can do is investigate them properly, thoroughly and independently, and take the action that would have resulted. And I think that the interesting thing is that they have known since last autumn that he was arrested, and the basic facts of this case were known to them from that point onwards, and yet they went ahead with not only leaving him on the payroll, but giving him a huge pay rise in addition. Now, that is unforgivable, unacceptable and inexcusable. So they have a case to answer here, and I think that they need now to come out in public and explain themselves.
We talked to a former head of ethics at the BBC, Trevor, who said, well, the BBC were in a contractual obligation to pay that because he hadn't been charged at that point, innocent until proven guilty. How would you respond to that?
Well, I think that Katie Razzle has already made the point on the BBC's media editor, that the simple fact that he had been accused is no different, really, to the fact that he's been charged. The facts of the case are there. They were clear for the BBC to study and examine, and I think that that was the point at which they should have acted.
OK, thank you. Trevor Kavanagh there, legendary.
He really is.
From The Sun, formerly of The Sun. A BBC spokesperson has said it was made aware in confidence that Huw Edwards had been arrested on suspicion of serious offences and released on bail whilst the police continued their investigation. At the time, no charges had been brought against Mr Edwards, and the BBC had also been made aware of a significant risk to his health. In the end, at the point of charge, he was no longer an employee of the BBC.
No reference to the threat to the health of the young boys who were gratuitously exploited by Huw Edwards.
Right, up next, Labour pledged to fix your potholes. We'll tell you about their big plans next. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Football and gambling can go hand in hand and cause long-term problems. New figures show that young adults aged between 16 and 24 who have bet over the last year are more likely to report mental health issues compared to those in older age groups.
And joining us now to discuss this is Matt Burgess, who is a former gambling addict and now helps those to deal with their own gambling issues.
Yeah, I think gambling is one of those things that is so accessible now. You know, everyone's got a kind of mobile phone in their pocket, walk around with a kind of 24-hour casino, if you like. So I think it's really important that people realise that we have to sort of recognise that that is a month of quite condensed gambling, and we don't want people to sort of carry that on into their everyday life, because that's when it can become really risky and you know, it could become addictive.
I had no idea, though, that it was linked to first-time gambling. For the first time, people might be able to pick up and have a go. And then it doesn't end there. It goes on, because by then you've got the bug. Is that how it works?
You've got to remember, for things like the Euros, the World Cup, so you get a lot more people watching football and therefore potentially betting on football.
May I ask you about how severe your own gambling addiction got?
Well, look, I think there was a couple of touch points for me where I realised that things were getting out of hand. There were some times at university where, you know, I kind of thought, you know, I'm definitely doing this a bit too much, but, you know, kind of thought maybe it would move on once I left, but it didn't. It did follow me. And then, you know, I got to points where I was at my worst gambling 16, 17 hours a day. I was spending huge amounts of money. It can spiral out of control very, very quickly, and that was the important thing that we want to highlight is, you know, what can start as fun can become very, very dangerous in a sense.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threats on.
As time passes,
she could have said storm.
You made my argument for me.
My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
Went everywhere.
Something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different. Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
OK. Good morning, it's 10:24. This is Britain's Newsroom with Andrew Pearson, Bev Turner. That clattering you can hear is Carol Malone.
Well, it's actually not me. My microphone's falling off. That's right.
We are also joined this morning by the director of the charity World Right, Kerry Dingle, who you will have seen on Michelle's show many times, but first time with us, Kerry. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Do we want to talk about Huw Edwards then
We
and
do.
his downfall? Go on, Carol. I bet you're dying to get.
Do you know what? I cannot believe there be. I mean, the echoes here, you know, of Jimmy Savile and Rolf Harris and all the rest of it. It's just outrageous that they have, you know, they have hidden this. They have tried, and the ridiculous excuse they gave today for not firing him was that he hadn't been officially charged. They knew about his arrest in November last year, and they knew about the nature of the vile things that he's been charged with. They knew about.
Which he's now admitted to.
Which he's now admitted to. So this is just so typical of the BBC that they have, you know, they didn't listen to the parents of that young boy that he paid 35 grand for.
They really tried.
Which is why they took their story to the Sun in the first place.
Which is why they had to. But they choose to listen to their TV presenters. It's not the first time that they've done this, because in their eyes, the TV presenters are sacrosanct, and the ordinary people out there, the people who pay the licence fee, are just not worth listening to. And these parents would never have gone to the papers, I'm pretty sure, had they been listened to. But you know what I want to say in all this, and this is a shout out to the media, you know, the Sun is the hero of this piece, and the BBC, you know, and it's the lofty state broadcaster is the villain in all of this. You know, the Sun, and because I'm pretty sure the police would not have pursued these allegations against Edward.
There's no doubt about it.
They would not have pursued them had it not been for the Sun story. They had to pursue
And the Sun got completely vilified.
They did.
I remember sitting in here last July, I think it was, when this happened, and there was still so much fear because his name might come out. Although everybody knew who it was, nobody was going to say anything. The Sun got absolutely damned and vilified for saying what was going on, with people like Owen Jones calling for it to be...
The Sun is a disgusting rag. They have to pay for what they've done to Huw Edwards. They tried to destroy someone's lives with false claims of illegality.
And let's give the other names out as well. There was Emily Maitlis, and there was John Southport, and there was David Yelland.
But having said all that, well, firstly, one of the problems we've got is, I think, which is wrong, are this privacy kind of judge's decision, which isn't actually law, you know, because the Sun was clearly acting in the public interest and made a decision itself not to reveal his name, because it actually wasn't a legal requirement. It was a judge's, you know, decision.
If the BBC had any sense of responsibility, they would have named him at the time. And it turned out his wife was the one who named him.
We mustn't forget as well, Kate, he got a £40,000 pay rise after the BBC was told he'd been arrested for serious charges of paedophilia.
And they're now coming out with all this talk about they had to do it because until he'd been
Why did he have to
No, they didn't actually. They didn't have to give him the pay rise. And the thing is, the BBC have got... This is not the first time. They've got form for this. They've got form for hiding, you know, the perverted behaviour of some of their staff. And you know, they absolutely knew about the other accusations from employees within the BBC that were happening, you know, on a regular basis. People making complaints about Edwards making suggestions to them. And they ignored that as well. They did nothing. And what I really want to see, they've conducted an investigation, which is farcical. They're investigating themselves. Where is the result of that investigation? We really need to see that now. They did an internal review. We've not seen how...
But the issue for me is very much both the importance of press freedom, and we saw how important it was in terms of what the Sun was able to do. So I think that's absolutely vital. But I would say, even something as shocking as this, I don't think people should lose their jobs on the strength of allegation. I think charges are quite important. So I don't think that's wrong. I'm not complaining about that. I do think, and I understand maybe the BBC's got contractual obligations or whatever, but it must be possible, you know, given its paying out so much money to claw back some of this inordinate amount of money that they've paid this man. Yes, absolutely. And also, the BBC shouldn't get off scot-free for allowing its privileged, powerful celebrities...
But they will.
To get away with things as shocking as this.
But also, just like cast our minds back to Russell Brand, caused a massive row between me and Andrew at the time.
Not the first, won't be the last.
Russell Brand had allegations made against him in a documentary. Caroline Dinich, who was the chair of the Culture, Media and Sport Committee at the time, wrote House of Commons headed paper saying that he should not be allowed to monetise his work online. I was included in that letter for even saying that a man is innocent until proven guilty. Where were those MPs about Huw Edwards?
No,
do you see the double standard?
It's
the double standard is extraordinary.
But also, you have double standards as well within the corporation itself, where you have the bosses of that corporation yesterday sending a statement to all employees saying, you know, we're appalled at this, you know, like they didn't know, we're appalled at this. There is definitely no place for this at the BBC. Well, yes, there is under them, because they did nothing to stop it. So all of the people who have colluded in this, who have colluded to hide it, to keep it under the carpet, they need to be got rid of, because they're going to let it happen again.
Yeah.
You know?
And we should remember, you know, Stuart Hall, remember him?
Stuart Hall, yeah, completely.
Savile.
Yes, there was Savile, there was Rolf Harris.
Can I just say as well that, you know, the way that mental health is now used as a get-out clause on everything. I think there's something seriously wrong with this, because even last July, I remember, as soon as his wife came out and named him, and everyone went like, oh, OK, we can name him. But mental health, oh dear, as though that means you take no responsibility for your action.
But it was clever because
it gagged the press.
The press was
It was a
gagged.
big shutdown.
Exactly.
It's this idea that somebody might be suicidal, and that has become this idea that you can't have blood on your hands if that person is suicidal.
And if he's suicidal, that's not the media's fault. That's
No.
the person who committed these heinous offences fault.
Exactly.
Because of the shame he's brought on himself, his family.
Didn't it seem like, to me, like a plot at the time, that suddenly his wife comes out and names him, and literally within minutes the press are told that he's gone into the Priory, he's gone in because of mental health issues. And that I think that gagged us. That effectively gagged us.
Yeah, it did.
It did. We've already done the statement from the BBC, so we don't need to read it for a third time. You're going to come back because we've got to go to the headlines, I'm afraid.
I think we do have to read this statement.
Why have we got to read it again?
Andrew.
Why have we got to read it again?
Well, the BBC, because there are rules in which we have to operate. They have said about this issue, at the time, no charges had been brought against Mr Edwards, and the BBC had also been made aware of the significant risk to his health, as we were discussing. In the end, at the point of charge, he was no longer an employee at the BBC.
So just in case you didn't that the first time, we're repeating it.
But also, we're not on because you might not.
We're not talking about
Carol. Thank you. Sorry, it was so brief. You'll be back in the next hour.
And they're going to talk about potholes.
Well,
big issue for everybody watching and listening. A bit about potholes.
Shut up, Sophia.
Bev, thank you. It's 10:32. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. Your headlines. A 17-year-old boy has appeared in court charged with the murder of 3 girls after Monday's stabbing attack in Southport. 8 other children and 2 adults were also injured. Some remain in a critical condition. The teenager can't be named because of his age. He's also been charged with 10 counts of attempted murder and remains in youth detention. Meanwhile, it was another night of violence across Britain last night, with angry crowds taking to the streets of Manchester, Hartlepool and London, encouraged by false social media posts. Some declared their support for Tommy Robinson, saying, "We want our country back." More than 100 people were arrested in the capital, while Cleveland police made 8 arrests, with more expected. The Prime Minister is due to discuss the situation with police leaders today. The Culture Secretary will meet the head of the BBC today after it was revealed that former news presenter Huw Edwards was arrested in November but continued to be employed until April. He pleaded guilty yesterday to charges related to receiving indecent images of children during an online chat. Tensions are rising in the Middle East as Iran orders retaliatory strikes on Israel following the death of a top Hamas leader. Thousands turned out for the funeral of Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran, who was the terror group's most senior political chief. He was killed during a strike on the Iranian capital this week, which immediately raised fears of broader escalation in the region. Both Britain's Foreign and Defence Secretaries are in Qatar for talks aimed at quelling the tensions. And just when you thought it was time to enjoy summer, thunderstorms are expected to hit at any moment now. Yellow warnings are in place for much of England and Wales, with heavy showers, lightning and thunder likely to impact travel. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sophia Wensler, more in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2765 and €1.1842. The price of gold is £1,905 and 77 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 8,342 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Up next, legendary swimmer. You might have been watching him on the Olympics coverage every night this week. Mark Foster is going to join us live from Paris, and we have had amazing success in the pool. Don't miss it. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Hello, very good morning to you. Welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast from the Met Office on what is, for some of us, going to be a hot, humid and thundery day. It is a bit fresher, more comfortable across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. Some outbreaks of rain here, but across parts of England and Wales, we already had some heavy thunderstorms overnight, and some of them are starting to clear away towards the east. But as we head into this afternoon, I am expecting some more heavy, thundery showers to develop, particularly across central and eastern parts of England. It is still going to be hot and humid, especially in the south, temperatures in the high 20s, possibly low 30s. A bit more comfortable further north, but perhaps a bit warmer than it was yesterday. As we go through the rest of today and across Scotland, there will be a few outbreaks of rain, perhaps across some eastern parts, but further west, a drier and maybe brighter picture to end the day. A few spots of rain perhaps for parts of Northern Ireland, and across northern England, some heavy, maybe even thundery showers are possible, particularly towards the northeast. But it's across central, eastern parts of England where we're going to have the most frequent, heavy, thundery downpours as we go through the second half of today. Watch out for some large hail, some torrential rain with perhaps 50 to 100 millimetres of rain in just a few hours, which is why we could see some impacts. There could be some further thunderstorms across some eastern parts as we go through the night and the early hours of tomorrow morning, but many places are going to actually have a largely dry night. Some clear skies, but it's still quite warm, it is still quite humid, and so another uncomfortable night for sleeping for some of us. More showers across the east first through tomorrow morning, but they will quickly clear away. However, more showers could then develop as we go into the afternoon, and again, some of these could be thundery. Further west, it's a drier picture until later on when a system comes in bringing some clouds, some wet and windy weather across parts of Northern Ireland and western Scotland. Temperatures are going to be gradually dropping, though still some high temperatures in the far east. Bye-bye.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. In East Yorkshire, the A164 is closed each way between Skidby and Bentley for an investigation. In Lincolnshire, the A57 is closed at Newton-on-Trent because of a burst water main. On the M60 in Greater Manchester, 2 out of 3 lanes are closed clockwise after an accident between junctions 12 and 13. The M62 Eccles interchange to Worsley is taking around 3/4 an hour in queues from junction 9 at Trafford Park, with queues too on the M62 towards there. And also on the M60 in Greater Manchester, there's a lane closed clockwise at junction 10 for the Trafford Centre where someone's broken down, causing queues. Buses replaced trains between Stoke-on-Trent and Stockport because of overhead line problems, with some trains diverting instead via Crewe. On the M6 in the West Midlands, the northbound entry slip road's blocked by a shed load at junction 9 from the A461 near Birmingham, and in Bridgend, the A4093 is blocked by an accident on Great Terrace in Blackmill.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Very good morning. It's 10:40. This is Britain's Newsroom. We love hearing from you this morning. If you're listening on the radio particularly, pull over when it's safe and send us a message on gbnews.com/yours.
And on the radio, we are so chuffed because our radio figures, the quarterly radio figures, have come through and they've soared. We're up 89%, breakfast is up 60%, and the station as a whole has overtaken, I think it's called Times Radio.
89%. 89% more listeners to this radio show, TV show. We're one of the very few people, we are the only one now, aren't we, that's simulcast. That means we're on the TV and we're on the radio exactly the same time. What you watch here on the telly, you can get in your car or go in the kitchen, put on your DAB radio and carry on listening to us. What a joy. Right, what have you been saying at home? Let's have a look here. What have you got there?
Well, Clive says... We're doing it on paper because, as you know, I'm not very good at doing it on the computer. They say, Andrew and Bev says, the British way of life is being eradicated in front of our very eyes. That's what is making people angry. We're talking about, again, more unrest last night. And I fear, particularly if it's a hot summer, could we have a summer of unrest? I hope not. But immigration is good for the country, but not at the current levels. It's too fast for people to integrate and blend into our society. Clive, I agree with you, because I just don't think there's many efforts to integrate. They're just becoming a big homogenous block, aren't they? The Bengali community are there, white community there, but they're feeling forced out.
And this is what Catherine Birbalsingh says, and I always think schools are a brilliant microcosm, aren't they, of the country at large. And I think what you get right in a school, you can look at that model and you can extrapolate it into communities and into a country as a whole. And she was saying on GB News last night, Britain's strictest head as Channel 4 caller, you cannot just say, look at this lovely experiment, it will all be fine. You have to. She manages, because she says if she doesn't manage it in her playground, she will have the African kids and the Pakistani kids and the Bangladeshi kids and the English kids, and they will naturally segregate. So she works really hard. She makes them break bread together, quite literally. They're forced to have lunch together.
And of course, she got into the difficulties because she refused to allow the Muslim children
to have a prayer room.
And she was taken to court over it, but she won.
And she won.
And that was important because she didn't want them to be treated differently to the other children, because what about the children who are Jewish? Can they go to synagogue? And the Catholic kids, the Anglican kids? And she won.
I'm just not sure.
No prayer at all.
I'm just not sure how you can actively encourage that on a wider level, though. How do you do that with members of your community? I'd love to know what you think. GBNews.com/your say. On the Huw Edwards story, Alan has said the BBC will continue this behaviour as long as it is a taxpayer-funded gravy train. I guess to some degree that's right. They aren't held to the same commercial standards as other channels, so they can just get away with things.
And it's interesting that the Culture Secretary, the new Culture Secretary, she's called... What is she called? It'll come to me in a second. She is meant to be meeting the Director General of the BBC today, but it may not be a face-to-face meeting because Lisa Nandy, she's got to go to the Olympics. What's more important? Dressing down for the Director General of the BBC, who thought it was appropriate to give Huw Edwards a £40,000 pay rise after he'd been arrested over these very serious, he's now admitted to paedophilia. £40,000 pay rise on his £440,000 salary.
I've got a suggestion, Lisa Nandy. If you're at the Olympics, go and check out the boxing, where there are genetically born men fighting the female boxers, as somebody that actually has a strong opinion in that, Lisa Nandy.
Well, she approves of that because she's now already said, as a new minister in the government, that she approves of trans women competing alongside women who are born women in sport, which I think it's not had the attention it should have, frankly.
We're going to be talking to Mark Foster, talking about the Olympics in just a little while, straight from Paris, to see how we're getting on there.
Talking to Mark Foster about the Olympics. I'm going to listen.
Right, today is Yorkshire Day. It's an annual awareness day promoting the UK's largest ceremonial county as a good place to be born, to live, to work and to visit.
So who better to talk to than our very own GB News Yorkshire and Humber reporter, our very own Anna Riley. Anna Riley, I'm not going to say good morning in a Yorkshire accent. I'm just going to say good morning. How are you? Happy Yorkshire Day.
Well, I'll say Happy Yorkshire Day, and I'll say "Hey up to you" and "How do." I can get away with it because I'm from Yorkshire. As you can see, we are in the magnificent York. You can just see the
Oh, I think we've lost Anna's audio for now.
Oh, shame.
I think what Anna Riley was going to say, we're looking there at the cobbled streets in Yorkshire.
Why are you doing a Birmingham accent?
I love Anna Riley's accent. I could listen to it all day. I think it's fantastic. Am I right in thinking it was raining on those pictures? Was it actually raining?
Well, doesn't it often rain in Yorkshire?
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. I don't know what it's like outside here in London today. It was very sunny this morning.
I thought we were going to play the music from Last of the Summer Wine to introduce Anna.
Should we just sing it?
Gallery, where's the music from Last of the Summer Wine?
We probably haven't got the rights to play it.
Oh.
It's cheaper to have me sing it.
I think we've got Anna back.
Anna, are you there?
I'm here, yes.
Very good.
Since 1985, Yorkshire Day has been officially celebrated, organised by the Yorkshire Society, and every year a new town or a different city has the honour of hosting the official civic celebrations. And here in York, we can just hear now behind us, band is starting up, so there's over 120 dignitaries that have come. Apparently, they say it's the largest gathering of mayors, of council leaders, of dignitaries in the UK and perhaps even in the world. Now today, August the 1st, it's all about celebrating the heritage, the rich culture that we have in Yorkshire, and the idea was born actually back in 1975. It was a result of when the Local Government Act came in. It split the traditional 3 ridings of Yorkshire, and people wanted to have this day on August the 1st to make sure that we protect our heritage of Yorkshire, protect our culture. Bev, I know how much you love our Yorkshire tea. We have fantastic food as well. Who doesn't love a Yorkshire pudding, a bit of parking? We've also got our own language in a way as such, our own lexicon, our own sayings. We've even got our own flag. But as you can see now, the area is being cleared. This procession that's currently being led is going to go all the way to York Minster, down Stonegate, and then there's going to be a special service at York Minster, followed by a civic lunch. So we can see there the drum bearer, and then if we just see behind, we can see the Lord Mayor and the Sheriff of York, who we spoke to earlier, and they were just telling us about how fantastic York and Yorkshire is, how much of an honour it is for York to be hosting this special day, and just telling us as well about how it puts York on the map. It also helps tourism in the area as well, having special days like this. And it's not just people from across Yorkshire that have come, it's people from across the world. We spoke to somebody earlier from Australia, an 88-year-old man called John Lunn, and he's the delegate from Australia. He's been there over 50 years, but he's still got his Yorkshire accent. He's still very proud of his roots, and he told me he wants it to be a national holiday. He said, we've got St. Patrick's. Why can't we have Yorkshire Day for everyone to celebrate? So, yeah, we can see the procession going past us now, the fine regalia. I don't know about you both, but I just think it's fantastic to have this pomp and ceremony and the outfits that people are wearing. I've been told those chains that they're wearing are quite heavy, but they just look absolutely brilliant. And if you can see around as well, there's plenty of people that have turned out here to watch this procession go by. But as I say, they are now following on to York Minster, where that special service is being held, and we'll have more for you later on, celebrating God's own country.
Oh,
how nice
thank you, Anna. How lovely. You know what you notice, though? They're all kind of tapping on a bit, aren't they, those mayors?
Yeah.
And you just want to think that the next generation are going to carry on that baton.
Yeah, because it's important to celebrate your heritage. And Anna makes the point, I mean, that in London they have a huge celebration for St Patrick's Day, which I've never quite understood, when we don't bother with St George's Day, patron saint of England.
Well, we need to start bothering. Right, up
We
next.
should.
Scotland are getting tougher on those dangerous XL bully dogs. They're catching up with England. This is Britain's Newsroom, live across the UK on GB News.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Stephen Dixon, and thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
King Charles has launched his own aftershave, costing, wait for it, an eye-watering 135 quid for a 100 millilitre bottle, promising buyers that they can smell just like the gardens of his Highgrove country pile. Now, this is something that Meghan Markle would do, surely not the King. Is this a case of King Charles selling out, watering down the brand, just like Meghan? Well, join me now to discuss this is the royal broadcaster, Helena Chard. Helena, welcome to the show.
Martin,
often on this
hi.
show, we've had a pop at Meghan Markle, the Sussexers, for selling out, for flogging strawberry jam, and now the King is flogging Pong. Is this really the right royal thing to do?
Do you know what? So the joy of luxury Highgrove splash, you know, at the end of the day, Highgrove is such a special place, and the Highgrove shop sells amazing things on there. And as we know, the profit actually goes towards charity. So it's the King's Foundation, which was formed in 1986. Profits go towards educational and training, and it's all to do with this sort of sustainable world. But not to forget as well the charitable aspect and the whole ethos of the King's Foundation, and that's so important. This is not just something that's going up on the website and just being sold purely to go into someone's pocket. So I think, you know, all in all, I think everyone should have a look at the Highgrove website and see what's on for sale. I mean, there are lots of really lovely, I think, pretty fairly priced products. And even more so, go and see the gardens. You know, as we know, King Charles is a keen environmentalist and the gardens are fabulous.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled.
Lovely. Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes. Thank you for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
(10:51). This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
So there are new rules and safeguards surrounding the ownership of XL bully dogs in Scotland from today.
Of course, Scotland decided it didn't want to go down the English route, but now they're going to make it a criminal offence to own the breed unless there is an exemption certificate.
So joining us now is GB News Scotland reporter Tony Maguire, who is in a dog shelter this morning. Morning, Tony. So Scottish legislation caught up with England now.
Yes, good morning. That definitely seems to be the case. There was that little bit of hesitation, wasn't there, at the beginning of this year when the Scottish Government did not follow suit with Wales and England, but that was soon rectified some months later. And last night, the deadline arrived for owners of XL bullies to register their dogs, along with a slew of other criteria. Now, from today, here's everything that's really changed. The dogs now need to be microchipped and neutered, and rehoming shelters like this, Islay Dog Rescue, can no longer rehome dogs of that breed. Interestingly enough, some breeders are already trying to get around the ban seen across the UK with a new breed, which is the pocket bully. Now, that obviously uses the DNA of the XL bullies, but crosses with other small breeds as well.
They've done this in Scotland because there was a rise in attacks on people, or because they feared there'd be a rise?
Well, there certainly has been. In fact, social media has actually, as it has been across the UK, been the greatest tool in identifying just how much of a problem this is. Now, attacks by big dogs are nothing new, but indeed there has been a real disproportionate amount of those attacks have been done by the XL bully breed, which has been bred to be aggressive and, in some cases, sadly, to fight. Now, speaking to the owner here at Islay Dog Rescue, they said that some of those dogs, sure, are big softies, but the real danger is the reason that they bite in that moment that they can just choose to snap.
Very interesting. All right, Tony. But XL bully dogs have caught up with the latest, because they rather mocked the fact the English government was going down that way. That was Tony Maguire, of course, in Scotland. And, of course, a lot of people are very upset at the idea that a lot of these dogs are going to be put down. They're not dogs, they're beasts.
Right, still to come, we're going to have more on the disorder and protest that's spreading across Britain. We're going to consider the reasons why. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News, the People's Channel.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, very good morning to you. Welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast from the Met Office on what is, for some of us, going to be a hot, humid and thundery day. It is a bit fresher, more comfortable across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. Some outbreaks of rain here, but across parts of England and Wales, we already had some heavy thunderstorms overnight, and some of them are starting to clear away towards the east. But as we head into this afternoon, I am expecting some more heavy, thundery showers to develop, particularly across central and eastern parts of England. It is still going to be hot and humid, especially in the south. Temperatures in the high 20s, possibly low 30s. A bit more comfortable further north, but perhaps a bit warmer than it was yesterday. As we go through the rest of today and across Scotland, there will be a few outbreaks of rain, perhaps across some eastern parts, but further west, a dry and maybe brighter picture to end the day. A few spots of rain, perhaps for parts of Northern Ireland, and across northern England, some heavy, maybe even thundery showers are possible, particularly towards the northeast. But it's across central, eastern parts of England where we're going to have the most frequent heavy, thundery downpours as we go through this second half of today. Watch out for some large hail, some torrential rain with perhaps 50 to 100 millimetres of rain in just a few hours, which is why we could see some impacts. There could be some further thunderstorms across some eastern parts as we go through the night and the early hours of tomorrow morning, but many places are going to actually have a largely dry night. Some clear skies, but it's still quite warm, it is still quite humid, and so another uncomfortable night for sleeping for some of us. More showers across the east first through tomorrow morning, but they will quickly clear away. However, more showers could then develop as we go into the afternoon, and again some of these could be thundery. Further west it's a drier picture until later on when a system comes in bringing some clouds, some wet and windy weather across parts of Northern Ireland and western Scotland. Temperatures are going to be gradually dropping, though still some high temperatures in the far east. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Celebrate a spectacular summer with your chance to win an incredible £30,000 in tax-free cash in our Great British Giveaway. It's the biggest prize of the year so far, and it's totally tax-free. What would you spend that on? Luxury holidays, a new car, or just put it away for a rainy day? Whatever you do with £30,000 in tax-free cash, make sure you don't miss out on the chance to make it yours. For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment.
This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory.
Don't miss My Big Opinion. Mark Meets and My Take at 10.
Democracy is a funny old thing.
And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it.
Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it.
That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
As time passes,
she could have said stump.
You made my argument for me.
My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
Went everywhere.
Something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different. Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Morning, 11 a.m. on Thursday, the 1st of August, live across the United Kingdom. This is Britain's Newsroom with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
The teenager charged over the Southport stabbing attack has been remanded in youth detention accommodation at Liverpool Magistrates Court. As he entered the dock, GB News understands that he smiled towards the press gallery.
More disorder across the country. Protests took place overnight after the Southport stabbing attack. Mark White has more.
Well, the Prime Minister is hosting a meeting of senior police chief constables at Downing Street this afternoon with some real concerns about the potential for a summer of disorder.
And cover-up at the BBC. The broadcaster is under fire for continuing to pay Huw Edwards his £480,000 salary, despite him having been arrested on suspicion of serious offences.
And that man, Donald Trump, he's in hot water again. He's questioned whether his Democrat rival, Kamala Harris, is Indian or black, and he did it at all places, a convention for black journalists. The White House has condemned him.
Wow, breaking news as well. GPs have vowed to take collective action for the first time in 60 years.
Well, that's going to be a problem for Wes Streeting, the new Secretary of State for Health, who thought everything was going to be hunky-dory with the election of a Labour government. They're not going to go on strike, but one of the 9 forms of collective action will be reducing the number of appointments they give to patients. Currently, it can be between 37 to 50 a day, if you're lucky, down to 25. Extraordinary.
Well, not that anyone can get an appointment anywhere with a GP at the moment. Let us know what you think. gbnews.com/your say. Also, we've got some breaking news about the Olympics in just a minute, but first, here's the news with Sophia.
Bev, thank you. Good morning. It's 2 minutes past 11. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. A 17-year-old boy has appeared in court charged with the murder of 3 girls after Monday's stabbing attack in Southport. 3 children, 7-year-old Elsie Stancoom, Alice Aguiar, who was 9, and 6-year-old BB King were killed during the attack at a holiday club. 8 other children and 2 adults were also injured. Some remain in a critical condition. The teenager can't be named because of his age. He's also been charged with 10 counts of attempted murder and remains in youth detention. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister will meet police leaders today amid widespread protests following Monday's attack. Angry crowds took to the streets of Manchester, Hartlepool and London, with some declaring their support for Tommy Robinson, saying, "We want our country back." It's after false social media posts claim the attacker was a Muslim asylum seeker who'd crossed the channel in a small boat. Cars were set on fire in Hartlepool while flares and bottles were thrown at a statue of Winston Churchill in London's Parliament Square. More than 100 people were arrested in the capital, while Cleveland police made 8 arrests, with more expected. Former police officer Graham Wheatone told GB News misinformation is a growing concern.
A lot of false information being posted. People are reacting to rumour and innuendo, not fact. And then we're seeing the protests that escalate then into violence and disorder on streets across the UK. It's not just, in the actual location. Because information is so widely shared these days, you can understand the anger and the frustration, but to actually then take that into violence and disorder, I think is unacceptable in the circumstances and doesn't take into account the families or the investigation that has been mentioned is still actually live, albeit charges have been laid.
In other news, the Culture Secretary will meet the head of the BBC today after it emerged Huw Edwards continued to be employed even after he was arrested on suspicion of serious offences. It comes after it was revealed that the former news presenter was arrested in November but continued to be employed until April. In a statement, the BBC said that at the time, no charges had been brought against Mr Edwards, and it was also aware of a significant risk to his health. He pleaded guilty yesterday to charges related to receiving indecent images of children during an online chat. Former BBC executive Roger Bolton told us that while some in the corporation may have known, its editorial staff didn't.
It's absolutely clear that BBC News and all the editors involved did not know until this week that Huw Edwards had been charged, let alone what he'd been charged with. And clearly, if you've watched all the reporting and reading the website of the BBC News has been reporting this top item, not hiding anything. However, the big questions remain about, we now know that the BBC executives were told in confidence that Huw Edwards had been arrested. When did they know he was charged? And the big question over all of this is, why did they continue to pay him so much money in these circumstances?
Now, tensions are rising in the Middle East as Iran orders retaliatory strikes on Israel following the death of a top Hamas leader. Thousands turned out for the funeral of Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran, who was the terror group's most senior political chief. He was killed during a strike on the Iranian capital this week, which immediately raised fears of a broader escalation in the region. Both Britain's Foreign and Defence Secretaries are in Qatar for talks aimed at quelling the tensions. Now to some breaking news. GPs in England have voted in favour of work to rule action. That vote took place moments ago and it could limit the number of appointments available. It comes despite the Health Secretary warning that taking action against the new government would only punish patients. It's the first time GPs have taken collective action since 1964, and we'll bring you more on this as we get it. There's uncertainty over the Bank of England's interest rates today, with some analysts suggesting improved inflation could lead to a cut. The base rate has been held at 5.25% since August last year, which is the highest level since 2008. But new data suggests the cost of living crisis is easing thanks to inflation cooling off. That's leading some to predict a cut today, but economists caution that other pressures, including wages, are still a concern for policymakers. A decision is due at around midday, and we'll bring you that live here on GB News. And just as you thought it was time to enjoy summer, thunderstorms are expected to hit at any moment. Yellow warnings are in place for much of England and Wales as the heatwave continues, but heavy showers, lightning and thunder will break the hot spell soon, with travel disruption and power cuts possible. Flood alerts are also in place in parts of the Midlands. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sophia Wensler, more in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
So to recap that breaking news, GPs have voted to take collective action for the first time in 60 years.
This disruption could potentially see GPs limit the number of patients they see each day to 25. So if you thought it was already impossible to see your family doctor, good luck when this action takes place.
Amazing. Right, 5 days, 17 medals, the best start to an Olympic Games for 112 years. And we're pleased to announce within the last hour, we have won another 2 medals, a bronze in the women's doubles sculls, this is on the lake, this is the rowing, and silver in the women's rowing 4. There's no stopping us, it seems, although I have to say that silver will be very disappointing. That's the boat that has Helen Glover in it. You'll know Helen Glover. She got Olympic golds. Mark White is with us as well in the studio. But I think Helen Glover got gold in London 2012. And yes, maybe one after.
She did, and then, of course, she went off and had 2 children.
3
children.
She had twins and another one. She's married to Steve Backshaw, the TV presenter from Deadly 60. Kids will know him. Yeah,
absolutely. He's been sending him his best alongside the children. And, you know, Helen there with the other team have been really tipped as the group that would do so well, that we were kind of bang on for the gold, but they were just pipped right at the last there by the Netherlands team.
Still great achievement.
Oh no, incredible.
She'll be disappointed.
Of course she will.
Come back after having 3 kids.
Yeah.
I mean, I couldn't row a boat. Now I'd be hopeless.
Yeah, and it's amazing. It's amazing to realise that we've done so well.
Yeah.
You know, the best we've ever achieved at this stage in the competition with the medals tally.
And we're going to be. We didn't get you in here, Mark, as an Olympics expert. We're going to be talking to Mark Foster as well in a moment. But of course, we got you in here to talk about the chaos last night in London and Hartlepool.
And an Aldershot and Manchester too, weren't there?
Thank you, yes, there were. And why this might be happening, Mark? Why now?
Well, of course, there's been a lot of commentary which has described the protests as being far-right, orchestrated and inspired. I think that is actually a lazy characterisation that misrepresents what is happening out there. There has been for years a growing anger, a seething anger at what people see as a disintegration of their communities and their values. And a lot of it is being blamed on mass migration. In particular, of course, the issue around asylum seekers and the requisitioning of hotels without any regard to what the local community might want, with hundreds of young males usually posted to these hotels that are taken out of commission for years on end. And it's not just a British issue. We should remember, just go over the Irish Sea and look at what's happening in Ireland and all of the unrest there, and similar real seething anger at their political class, who are branding the protesters there from communities as being far right, instead of actually perhaps tackling the issues of concern to these people. And as I say, it's not even just the UK and Ireland. Right across Europe, countries are grappling with this issue of mass migration and a feeling of discontent within their communities. There's got some countries there looking to adopt, for instance, the Rwanda model of a third country to send asylum seekers to. You would never have thought it in EU member countries, but they are looking at that because they know they've got to come up with solutions, or they are really heading down the road of potentially serious problems ahead.
And Mark, we've talked before in the form of the former Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, about two-tier policing, but we were talking earlier to Rakib Ehsan, who's a social integration expert, who said the Home Secretary is using different language for what's happened in Southport, completely different language and tone to what happened with those disturbances in, what was that suburb of Leeds?
Hare Hills.
Hare Hills. That's very dangerous, because that means she's treating one group, he was suggesting, with kid gloves, the rioters in Hare Hills, who were people of the racial origin was, differently to the white mob who caused problems in Southport.
Well, I saw those clips of interviews with Yvette Cooper. To be fair, she is condemning both the violence in Hare Hills and, of course, the violence in Southport. But you're right to characterise it as her being more robust in her language and the condemnation of what had taken place in Southport than what was
Why the kid gloves for what happened in Hare Hills?
I don't know, you'd have to ask her that, but of course that just feeds in to a feeling, perhaps, within a wider community that there is, you know, two-tier policing, that there is disregard for the concerns that people in communities right across the country are feeling and have been feeling for years. This didn't just happen in isolation. It wasn't just sparked by the events, as absolutely hideous as they were in Southport, and the misidentification, or at least the facts that were coming out about this 17-year-old suspect, and suggesting that he'd come across a year ago on a boat as an asylum seeker.
There's so much dissatisfaction, Mark, and it's almost like so much government policy hasn't factored in any sort of psychological behavioural impacts. And what I mean by that, what I mean is, take this. Let's go back to 2020. We had the lockdowns, which will have closed some businesses for people. It will have affected relationships. It will have affected kids. There'll be teenagers in this crowd who've got mental health issues. I know we use that term too loosely, but the sense of what now, the fallout from the last 4 years, the Conservatives have ridden off into the horizon. All the key architects from that period of time have had no form of recourse as to whether they made any of the right decisions. And now you've got Labour in power, who just wanted more restrictions on people. And you oppress a group of people, you crush them, like happened in the last 4 years. Don't be surprised if this volcano erupts out of various fissures, because these people don't have a sense of hope and purpose. And what now? Where do they go? Will that happen again? Will they just be told they've all got to stay at home one day? Because we never for me, we haven't put that to bed. And a lot of people in that crowd will feel like this as well. And I feel like there's got to be more conversations to be had around where these people go. What is their life going to look like now, going forward? Where do they get their hope from? And when you put that against, as you say, the unfairness that they feel, that people can arrive here and get a dentist, get their teeth seen to, get their health looked at in a hostel. They get money. They literally get handed cash when they arrive at the hotel to spend that week. Who is looking after these people who feel that the state takes them? Tax. We're all paying massive amounts of tax but we're not getting anything in return for that. Do you think Labour have got any idea what they've walked into?
Well, they are realising very quickly that they are facing discontent in communities right across the country, and the potential, which is why you've got these senior policing figures going to Downing Street, for this really to become a very nasty summer ahead unless some of those concerns are redressed. And yes, it's right, I think, to meet policing leaders and to give support to the police who will be facing some very difficult days and weeks ahead. But perhaps as well, maybe the politicians need to be doing exactly as you've said there, addressing the other wider concerns and this feeling that in society things are getting worse for individual people in their communities. An acknowledgement that perhaps the government understands and is looking at solutions. For instance, to be fair to the Labour government, they say, absolutely committed to getting these hotels back into public ownership and stopping the requisition of the hotels for use by asylum seekers.
Let's just get back to what the Home Secretary said, because she did talk about mob rule, thugs in Southport burning police cars. Police cars were burnt in Hare Hills, where she talked about audacious criminality. That is completely different language. She did not... Many of those protesters were British South Asian Muslims. They were protesting because a Romani child was being removed from his family by social services. She didn't call them mobs. She didn't call it gang warfare. It was different language, wasn't it? And that's leading to this idea, it's them and us.
There's no doubt when you analyse the two statements made by the Home Secretary, there is different language being used. And again, this feeds into a perception amongst people around the country as well, that I think it traces back, a seminal moment was when the child abuse scandals were unearthed in northern towns.
Rochdale,
that involved,
like Rochdale.
Yeah, Rochdale and many other places besides, that were mainly men of Pakistani heritage, that local authorities, police forces and others in positions of authorities sat on, tried to bury, didn't want to talk about because of the potential for an issue around affecting community cohesion. And really since then, trust in these communities towards their authority figures have been slowly degraded, and it's getting worse, not better.
Mark, thank you so much. Right, still to come this morning, the Olympian Mark Foster, you might know him from Strictly Come Dancing as well. He's been on your telly every night this week, covering the Olympic swimming from the pool. He's going to join us live from Paris to tell us what to expect. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Tune in to Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. GB News royalty with your perfect start to the weekend. Lucky us. Feisty and fearless guests.
Well, I'm a normal person, so ask me.
Honest opinions that raises more questions than a Gary Barlow tax return. And a few surprises along the way. Might be cold in this studio. That is Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. 8 to 9, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Welcome back to Sunday with Michael Portillo. Most people will be familiar with French artists such as Auguste Renoir, Claude Monet and Camille Pissarro, who with others made up the Impressionist movement of the late 19th century. But we are probably less familiar with the British contingent of the Impressionists, artists like Frank Bramley, Elizabeth Armstrong Forbes and Walter Langley, amongst many others. David Messam is on a mission to change that. I'm joined by David Messam and by Patrick Duffy, an esteemed archivist. These people we're talking about, are they really Impressionists? I mean, I assume they're British, but are they Impressionists?
I think we had the same query, and I wrote a book about the whole thing in '85, actually. And we were the book nearly went out as The Garden of Bright Images, actually, though my author then, Laura Wortley, was quite insistent that it should be called The Garden of Bright Images, but I thought it'd probably be put in the gardening section, actually. So, you know, the question you ask is what is on other people's minds, too, actually. Have we got Impressionism in this country? I think for me, as I used to do quite a lot of shopping, if you like, in America, looking for English pictures out there, and they've got American impressions, and I'm quite happy with it, but the English are different.
Were they friends and colleagues? Were they collaborators with the French Impressionists?
Broadly speaking, British Impressionism is, as we term it, is the post-Impressionist movement. So they were certainly inspired by the French Impressionist movement as it was, but they came later. They travelled around Europe and became attuned to en plein air painting, so painting outdoors, and that's what they brought over with them. We call it British realism. But there's a focus.
British realism, I kind of recognise.
Yes.
I mean, that's exactly what that looks like.
Exactly. The People's Channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Well, here's some very happy news just breaking. 2 children have been discharged from hospital after the shocking attacks in Southport. So that's very good news for the family.
That really is.
We'll bring you more when we know about that.
Yeah. We're joined in the studio now by Carol Malone and Kerry Dingle are here with us. Right, what do you want to talk about, ladies?
We thought we would do GPs who have just voted.
Just broken.
Just now, this one, have voted to go on strike.
It's not a strike, Carol. It's industrial action. They're going to do a lot fewer appointments if you could get one in the first place.
A lot fewer appointments. But the whole premise of this GPs taking industrial action, I mean, I think it's hideous, but there was as well as this action they were taking, there was a poll this week that said 84% of them would go on strike if that was put to them. And I find this astonishing that, you're quite right, it's hard enough to get an appointment now anyway. I get why they want more time with people, but, a majority of GPs now just work 3 days a week. Yeah. So if they maybe worked 5 days a week, they wouldn't have as many, they wouldn't have such a big backlog. And also, they were talking about how they're not terribly well paid. I mean, they're incredibly well paid. Most of them are GP partners in England, and the average salary for GP partner is 153 grand a year. They are not on the bones of their backside. And for any doctor to threaten to bring the National Health Service to a standstill, it is a total betrayal of patients. It's a betrayal of the Hippocratic Oath, because they are literally putting people in danger. And for what? These are very well-paid, privileged people. Yes, they work hard, we know that, but to abandon patients, I think, is not a good thing.
Kerry, are they abandoning their patients?
Yes, I think they are. I mean, I always support people fighting for more and a better life, but these people don't have a bad life and a hard time. And I think a lot of citizens in Britain, elderly friends of mine and relatives, I mean, you can't get an appointment wherever you are in the country for love nor money. This is a failure of public service. The whole ethos of service for the public seems to have gone down the Swanee. And these people are acting like entitled children who think they should have over 100 grand a year for more funding for what? Let's face it, COVID was used as an excuse to make appointments by phone, to not see anybody, and to carry on with an inadequate second-rate service afterwards.
And Kerry, their pay since COVID, just since COVID, has increased by 24%, which is astonishing when you think about it. And, they're going on about they need more family time. How much more do they need? 3-day week, they don't work evenings, and they don't work weekends. No. They work a lot less hard than a lot of other people who work for a fraction of their money.
Do you not think now they've got industrial action in their DNA, this British Medical Association? It's becoming rapidly now the most militant trade union in the country. The junior doctors, some of whom... We know they're not really juniors. They're one below the level of consultant.
3rd years.
Some are earning £96,000 a year. Their leader has already said this week, within a year's time will be a good, convenient window for another strike. Thanks very much for the 22%, by the way, you've given, even though they're taking money away from poor pensioners in the winter fuel allowance. I think they've just got it in their DNA now, and they're going to continue to strike. And this is going to be a big problem for this new Labour government and their mates in the unions.
Well, I think that you might well be right, Andrew, but I'm not against people taking strike action.
I am against doctors taking strike action.
I am for people demanding more, but I'm not sympathetic to this particular sector and to the BMA. It's not as though they ever support anybody else having a pay rise. It's not as though they come out and say, we're against a tax on people's living standards. They're not doing anything of the sort. This is I, me, we're superior, screw you all, we want more for us only. And I don't think the public are going to be sympathetic to them at all.
You hit it on the head there. I think they do think they're superior, because I'm sick of hearing doctors saying, you know, we do a very important job. So does everybody in their job. They all feel that their job is very important, and some of them work very, very long hours.
People who do deliveries for next to no money.
Yeah, for next to no money. So
Dustbin men and women. Where would we be without them?
And it is astonishing that you're right. They're privileged. They're entitled, and they work fewer hours than most other people.
I would be completely draconian. I would say they can't go on strike, and I would also have it into their contract. After your extensive training at the British taxpayer,
you pay back if you go.
You're going to Australia or Thailand as a doctor, you're going to repay every money we put into your training. That's what I would do, because this is going on. It looks like this is just going to carry on under the new government.
Well, it is. To be honest, I did think if Labour got in, they wouldn't. They would give them an easy time, but they're clearly not going to. The junior doctors are ungrateful for the 22%. They're saying it's not a good...
Look at the people who are the officers of the BMA. They're hard left.
Yeah, they accepted it. And then they accepted it, and on the day they accepted it, later in the afternoon, they said, well, actually, it's not a very good offer.
Yeah. I don't think there's anything left-wing about acting as a, privileged scumbag, and I'm afraid that's what...
Good girl! I wanted to say that.
I don't think that's left-wing at all. I consider myself of the left, and I think their behaviour is appalling.
Completely.
I wouldn't be draconian on something like the right to strike, because I think it's a slippery slope.
Yes.
It will affect people who, like we've seen in Amazon that they're fighting to get a trade union because they have no right to take any action at all. So I think if you crack down on anyone, it will affect everyone else.
There would be certain services, police officers are already immune from... They can't strike, nor can the armed forces. I'm sorry, I'd put doctors in there too.
People in emergency services, people who are dealing with people's lives on a daily basis, saving them, shouldn't be allowed. And I would
consider how much money
that
we pay to train them.
Completely, and I would say, and they're always talking about, Australia is a much better system. Yeah, you know why? Because it's a mostly privatised system.
Yes, quite.
And that's why they can pay doctors more. But they're insistent, and the BMA is that the National Health Service has to be free at the point of use. So you can't have it both ways. You can't have massive salaries for doctors and still have a National Health Service in the way we have.
Should we talk about potholes? We've been trailing this all morning. Are you aware of the pothole story, ladies?
Yes, I am.
I'm not, but I get very annoyed with the potholes.
Do you have a car?
I do.
So has your car been in a crater?
Horrendous.
Yeah.
And blew a tyre. And I had to have the police help get my car across the road after it had gone bang in a...
Well, they pledged £8.3 billion Labour, didn't they, Carol, in the run-up to the election? Are they going to stand by it?
Rachel Reeves did this, and everything she's pledged so far has gone down the toilet. So the
Chancellor, remember? The Chancellor.
Well, OK. I think everyone knows who she is now, Andrew.
Yeah, they should do.
For the U-turn she's done. Yeah, so they're now not going to do it. They're going to... And, she's... There was an interesting stat this morning. For the 26 days she's been Chancellor, she has committed £1 billion of public money to the pay rises, to the National Wealth Fund, to some else I can't remember, but all of that money, £1 billion a day, for the pay rises, for the public sector pay rises, that's the other one. And now she's saying the potholes, which, it might not seem a big thing to a lot of people, but as you've just said, Kerry, I nearly said a bad word there, it wrecks your car. Yeah. My tyre was blown out. That was £200 to replace it, and it hit the bottom. And that's happening to everybody. And in my street, we counted 156 potholes. They came to fill the ones outside my house the other day. Do you know what? I mean, it's beyond the wit of councils. It's that much higher above the road surface. So it's just as dangerous for your tyres as the potholes were.
But haven't we got a broader problem anyway, and that's just growing anti-car culture? And we've got it with this new government. with their commitment to net zero. We've seen it with ULEZ in
Yeah.
London, which is a disaster. And so anything, you know, and the number of people now saying that, oh, you know, you don't need a car and why do you have to have a car? I don't know what planet they're on.
And 20-mile-an-hour speed limits all over the country.
It's just a joke.
They are just
Cycle lanes going everywhere, which
it's just
which are a nightmare.
And these city schemes where you can only go, you know, a certain distance, like they were going to bring in Oxford. I think they've even brought it in Brighton. I think it's appalling. I think denying us the great advances of mobility and freedom of movement in our own country is appalling. And unfortunately, potholes are very much part of that because, you know, they don't care about what most people want.
There's 200 miles of roadworks going on in the UK today. On major motorways. Do you know what they're doing? Putting in extra lay-bys on the smart motorways
that they took away in the first place.
Proven so dangerous, they're having to stop. So if you're going anywhere this weekend, and of course it's this August weekend, people are going to be going around visiting family, going off on holidays. 200 miles of roadworks because they've had to close down to add lay-bys. Ridiculous.
The M3 has had a 50-mile limit on it now for about a year and a half. They've finished all the roadworks. They're not happening now. And yet we all have to go, because if you go over it, you get a ticket.
And the sign will say, or sometimes, we're doing this for air pollution.
Yeah, please. Yeah.
Right. Ladies, thank you so much. OK, Sophia Wenzel's waiting with your headlines. Here she is.
Bev, thank you. Good morning. I'm Sophia Wensler. Your headlines at 11:30. 2 children have now been discharged from hospital after Monday's stabbing attack in Southport. It comes after a 17-year-old boy appeared in court this morning, charged with the murder of 3 girls. The teenager can't be named because of his age. He's also been charged with 10 counts of attempted murder and remains in youth detention. It was another night of violence across Britain last night, with angry crowds taking to the streets of Manchester, Hartlepool and London, encouraged by false social media posts regarding Monday's stabbing attack. Some declared their support for Tommy Robinson, saying, "We want our country back." More than 100 people were arrested in the capital, while Cleveland police made 8 arrests, with more expected. The Prime Minister is due to discuss the situation with police leaders today. GPs in England have voted to limit the number of appointments available in their first collective action since 1964. NHS England says it could cause significant disruption across the whole health service. The British Medical Association says it's taking action over what it describes as a lack of funding for GPs. The Culture Secretary will meet the head of the BBC today after it was revealed that former news presenter Huw Edwards was arrested in November but continued to be employed until April. He pleaded guilty yesterday to charges relating to receiving indecent images of children during an online chat. And just when you thought it was time to enjoy summer, thunderstorms are expected to hit any moment now. Yellow warnings are in place for much of England and Wales as the heatwave continues. But heavy showers, lightning and thunder will break the hot spell soon, with travel disruption and power cuts possible. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sophia Wensler, more in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2763 and €1.1838. The price of gold is £1,905 and 62 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 8,356 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Up at noon, good afternoon, Britain, with Tom and Emma Webb. Hello, both of you.
Hello,
what have you got
hello.
coming up on the show today?
You know what? You think you get to August and the news slows down.
Not always.
You think you enter some sort of silly season where you just talk about, I don't know, alpacas or llamas or whatever. But we've got 3 enormous stories today that continue to rumble on through this week. Starting off, of course, with the disorder that we're seeing not just in Southport now, but in London, in Hartlepool and in Manchester.
Aldershot too.
Yeah.
Shocking.
People are really angry.
They are. We've been talking about that.
It's not just immigration.
And it's not just social media, is it?
It's not just immigration. It's not just social media. It's a really complex social mix of a sense of hopelessness and powerlessness.
And I think people are sick of being told, you know, just hold hands, sing kumbaya.
Go to another vigil.
When children are murdered, it is totally legitimate to be angry. Not legitimate to criminal damage breaks or whatever, but it is perfectly legitimate to be angry, and I think people are allowed to be angry.
And it's simplistic for politicians like the Home Secretary, Vet Cooper, to go on about the far right and English Defence League, because it's not about that.
It's been very, very badly handled, I think, by
I think
the
it
government.
has.
Prime Minister, of course, meeting with police chiefs today. We'll see what comes of that. But also...
Nothing.
The suspect in the stabbing case in Southport appearing in court. There has been some discussion about whether this anonymity that is provided to anyone under the age of 18 who is suspected or even indeed charged around a criminal act, whether they should have the same level of anonymity applied in law as all children. I mean, personally, my personal view is that if you're 17 and you might be 6'4" and have a full beard and you might be burlier than I am, I'm not sure you should have the same protection as an 8-year-old.
And Tom, it's an interesting question for this new government because they want to give 16-year-olds the vote. So if you're old enough to vote, you're certainly old enough to be named in a criminal case.
What's the benefit of naming them, though? What is the benefit of us knowing who that person is?
I think a lot of the suspicion and the anger comes from a distrust, a lack of trust between authority and people.
People think it's being covered up.
Well, there's an enormous vacuum
is the
of
best.
no information. People need to have information about what's happened. They need information about motive and so on. And I think it's frustrating for people to not have that information.
I suspect the judge...
I don't think we do have a right to know.
Oh, I do.
No, because you start to go into the territory then of anybody under 18. Under 18s are treated like adults, and that is a very dangerous.
I'm not saying there should be no
The age of criminal responsibility is 16, so maybe between the age of 16 and 18 there should be discretion for the Home Secretary if it is in the public interest to release that information that otherwise...
What will happen is the judge will make an order after sentencing. If he's found guilty, by which time he might be 18 anyway.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's a really difficult one.
It's a very difficult one, but of course that's not the only thing we're talking about as well. We've got interest rate decision, perhaps the first cut, another mind-bending reason as to why the last Prime Minister called the election when he did. Soon. I mean, we've seen now pretty strong growth in the country, higher than was expected in the last numbers. We've seen inflation now back to target for a number of months on the trot. We're likely to see the first interest rate cut since 2022 today at midday. Goodness me, why on earth did the Prime Minister call the election?
Living off the family silver.
Because he'd had enough of that job.
And of course, we'll be talking about the BBC and Huw Edwards.
Selfish reasons. Right, Tom and Emma will be here from midday. Up next, it's Yorkshire Day. Anna Riley is live in York. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
She was supposed to say "e up," but she didn't.
Hello, welcome to your latest GB News weather update brought to you from the Met Office. It could be quite an impactful day today with torrential downpours, a risk of thunderstorms for many areas of England and Wales. Further north, it will be a drier day, but a change is on the way from Friday as these weather fronts will push in from the north and west, bringing some cloudier skies later on this afternoon to parts of Northern Ireland, western Scotland, but it will brighten up for a time here. But it's further south across England and Wales where there's that risk of thunderstorms and the warning in force. We could see some very torrential downpours and localised impacts due to heavy rain and water on the roads. That could bring disruption to travel. So a humid feeling day as a result of that. Not everywhere's going to see these thunderstorms. You might get away with a fairly dry and sunny day. And actually, as I said, across parts of northern Scotland for this afternoon, it's going to brighten up for a time after a bit of a cloudier start this morning, but more rain is on the way throughout this evening. Across eastern areas of Scotland, risk of the odd shower, but some sunny spells, and it's a warmer day today here than yesterday. Parts of Northern Ireland as well, seeing a fine end to the day, but these thunderstorms across England and Wales will likely continue into this evening as it stays quite humid, so further disruption is likely into this evening and overnight. But it will slowly ease off overnight as that risk does fade away. So a fairly dry night to come once those thunderstorms do push away to the east for most of us, but across the north and west it is turning much wetter and windier overnight. For many of us, it's still staying quite humid and muggy, temperatures in the mid-teens as a minimum. But to start the day, there'll be plenty of brightness. So a brighter day, still that humid feel around, and that will allow some thunderstorms to break out potentially across eastern areas of England. But for most of us, a fairly dry day, or at least a start to the day, as we will see some wet and windy weather spread into parts of Northern Ireland and Scotland later on in the afternoon. But ahead of that, still feeling very warm in the sunshine. Bye-bye.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Stephen Dixon, and thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good morning. It's 11:41. It's been a long week.
Certainly has.
It's been a tough week.
And it's been a terrible week.
Awful, terrible week.
And we think we've had a tough week. Just think about if you're in Southport. Just think if you're a parent of one of those children.
Thought of nothing else, to be honest.
We will bring you more on this throughout the day. Two of the little children have been discharged from hospital, so that is cheering news in Southport.
John has said this morning, I said at the beginning of the week, when it was my son's 28th birthday, but he was killed last year, that my heart went out to those parents who should never have to lose a child in hospital. Thank you, John. I'm so sorry you've had to go through that.
Terrible.
Kay says, GPs on industrial action, how would you know? How would you know? We can't see one for love and money.
Well, I have to say, there is that point. Remember, we had a bit of a run-in with that doctor the other day who said, well, the whole plan of this is they want to spend more time with patients because they don't spend... So how does halving the number of appointments they're doing currently with patients mean you get to spend more time with patients? I'm sorry, these doctors will lose all public support.
The trouble is we've got what we are now moving towards, and this is part of the problem why we see all these riots and people being so angry, and I'm not excusing the behaviour, it's been horrific the last few nights. You feel a sense that there's those who can pay for a service life, and there are those who can't.
Absolutely.
And those of us who are lucky to have private health insurance, for the first time ever in my life, I'm 50 years old, the first time ever I have now got private health insurance for my children. And I don't want to pay that money because I believe in the NHS, but I can't, my kids can't see a GP.
No.
So I'd rather prioritise and budget so that I've got some private health care when they need to. I shouldn't have to do that. And I shouldn't have to be able to get a service that somebody that isn't as fortunate as me can't access.
And of course you're paying twice because you're paying your taxes into the NHS, and now you're paying privately.
Anyway, there's a lot to sort out, isn't there? Is it, what is it, halfway through the year? We got a little...
Well, we're in August now.
We're in August. How did that happen? How did it become August? We were going to fix the country at the beginning of the year, Andrew Pearson. We haven't done a very good job.
Don't worry, we've got a new Labour government. They're going to fix it.
Phoebe says, I think if the BBC and other channels presented these incidents the same way as Mark White, it would not have erupted. As it is, you can hear the frustration every day people feel about not being heard. I wonder how many of these rioters actually went out and voted, and who did they vote for? It's a really good point, Phoebe.
Yes.
Yeah. Let me see what else we've been saying on On here, do you have any in
And the GPs, it's just come through today, if you're just tuning in, this has been a ballot that was started in the middle of June. It went completely under the radar during the general election, so they've not taken industrial action since 1964. So they are now taking 9 different forms, but the one that's going to hurt people most is withdrawing the number of appointments they provide. Down to 25 a day maximum. That's not a lot when some are providing 50. And that's if you actually get to see a GP.
Yeah.
What's your experience of your GP? We'd like to hear from you. Can you get in to see a GP? A colleague actually the other day called in at that terrible 1 minute past 8 call. She was number 39, 30 seconds past 8.
Yeah.
39 in the queue.
Right, still to come. Do you recognise this?
Well, not sure what we recognise here, because there's nothing happening.
Do you recognise our face?
Do you recognise us? That's Bev Turner. I'm Andrew Pearce. Do you recognise us?
It's lovely. Shush, just take a breath. And relax.
Oh, how lovely is that?
That, of course, is the theme tune to Last of the Summer Wine. For those of you who are of a vintage to remember that Sunday night comedy on
Nora
TV.
Batty.
Nora Batty in her wrinkled stockings and her rollers in her hair. Well, today is Yorkshire Day, and we're going to go to York next. Don't go anywhere.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled.
Lovely. Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Did you ever flirt with the idea of going to America?
Yeah, I've twice happened to me. Once I was offered in Canada the job of a weatherman.
Oh.
Yeah, I was offered that, and I just sort of thought of it. What is the point where your mother, your father would never see you on TV? What's the point of doing it if nobody knows you on it? You know. So I thought.
Big money though, even for a weatherman.
I did. Yeah, it was more than a weather job, but I said no, basically. And then I went and I did this this quiz show for Fox TV.
Oh.
Yeah, they said, we want the Irish guy that does the lottery. I think they meant Dermot O'Leary or something. They ended up, they got me, and I couldn't believe it. And I went over to do a daytime version of this. And then 3 days into it, they changed everything, and they said, this is so good, we're putting this out in the evening. And I remember phoning my wife and saying, we're going to have to move out to California.
Oh, wow.
They really want me here, and I'm going down. You know that street with all the palm trees and whatever? That's the way I was going to work, in this limo and whatever. And I had a bungalow there and a golf cart. It was absolutely incredible. Anyway, I'll cut this very long story short. So I'm working really, really bad. A lot of very ignorant people, it has to be said. And really have one regret in my life, that I didn't punch a guy when I was out there. I really would have, if I had my life to live again, I would have really satisfiedly been sacked for punching this git. But basically, anyway, they put the show out. One episode of the show went out, and it came fourth in its rating. So it was behind Lost, it was behind The Biggest Loser, there was something else there.
Fair enough.
Fair enough, and it came fourth, and that was it. It disappeared. 36 shows or so disappeared. Disappeared, never to be shown again.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Saturday's Yorkshire Day.
And so I'm neither of us. Well, Bevy's going to do it again. She's going to do a Yorkshire accent, but I'm not.
Let's all celebrate and eat Yorkshire puddings and gravy.
Why does she keep doing that Birmingham accent?
I love the Yorkshire accent, and no one's got a better Yorkshire accent than our Yorkshire and Humber reporter, Anna Riley. Morning, Anna. You all right?
Anna, can I interrupt you? Anna, could I ask you to...
You're right.
Anna, could I ask you to score out of 10 Beverly Turner's Yorkshire accent?
I'm going to give her a solid 6.
I will try harder, Anna. I'll try much harder. Right, what's going on where you are? It looks
That's
beautiful.
it, just a little bit deeper. A little bit deeper and a little bit longer in those vowels and you've got it. E by gum, you've got it.
Oh,
so yeah, happy Yorkshire Day. We're joined now at York Minster, where a service is currently being held. There's over 120 dignitaries that have come from all over Yorkshire, mayors, members of the council, and they're in the Minster at the moment having a special service all in aid of Yorkshire Day. We'll just show you here just the extent of the Minster. It's a huge building, dates back to the 7th century. It's one of Europe's, if not the world's, most magnificent cathedrals. We'll just pan up a little bit here just to show you how beautiful the building is, and then if we just move along we can see the statue that was unveiled by King Charles back in November 2022, 2 months after the passing of our late Queen. He unveiled that, and that statue was made here just round the corner of the Minster. I think it's just beautiful, so I just wanted to show you that and what a fantastic tribute it is to our late Queen and what a magnificent building it is. And today, August the 1st, it's all about celebrating Yorkshire Day. Officially it began back in 1975, but in 1985 the Yorkshire Society got together and started having civil ceremonies, having dignitaries from all over our God's own county to celebrate what's so great about Yorkshire, our culture, our history, our traditions, our language as well. I spoke to Sir Rodney Walker earlier. He's the chairman of the Yorkshire Society, and this is what he had to say.
Born many years ago by people from the county who actually think the largest county in the UK is worthy of its own recognition. I mean, remember, the population of Yorkshire is bigger than that of Scotland. It's renowned for its warmth and hospitality, its directness, its countryside, its scenery, its heritage, and if that isn't worth recognising once a year, then I don't know what is.
What an amazing summary there of just how brilliant Yorkshire is. You can probably tell how proud us Yorkshire people are of our region. And after this event at the Minster that's currently going on, the dignitaries will then move on for a special civic lunch, and I hope they've got Yorkshire pudding on the menu, don't you?
Very much so. Well, look, we have loved seeing the sights of Yorkshire this morning, Anna, in your e-bag gum. Go on, have a go.
No, I'm not doing it.
Oh, come on, Andrew.
No, because I'm not... No, Anna, because I wouldn't even get 6 out of 10.
I'll rate you.
OK, then.
I'll rate you, Andrew.
Right, E by gum.
Oh, very good.
How many out of 10?
That's not bad. That's not bad. I'll give you a 6 as well.
No, more. More. We're fiercely competitive in this studio.
7
there we are. 7.
There we go.
Okay, you...
Oh, we got to go, Anna. I hope you have a lovely day up there in Yorkshire, and happy Yorkshire Day to all our viewers and listeners up north.
And especially to our radio listeners today, because it's a very special day, because our listening figures up 89%. Great day for the station, because breakfasts were up 60%.
Spread the word. If you like what we do here at GB News, do tell your friends, won't you? We're done for this week, although you're doing some holiday cover. Andrew's actually working on Saturday. This never happens.
I am going to be Nana Akua between 3 and 6 p.m. on Saturday. We don't look alike, we don't sound alike, but it'll be a lively programme, I can guarantee you that.
And then we will both be back on Monday morning. I hope you have a lovely weekend and a lovely Friday as well. Long weekend in the sunshine.
Don't forget your brollies, because the storms are on their way.
This is true. We don't want to leave on that note. Tom and Emma are here to cheer you up for the next 3 hours.
Well, I don't think it's going to be too cheery. So Manchester, London, Hartlepool, all of the protests really kicking off over what happened in Southport. And we'll be talking about all of that on the show later.
We will indeed, but meanwhile, police are in Downing Street for a meeting about how law and, frankly, disorder across the country is breaking down. Our reporter has been in Southport, in the same room as the defendant accused of killing those 3 little girls. We'll have all of the details.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, very good morning to you. Welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast from the Met Office on what is, for some of us, going to be a hot, humid and thundery day. It is a bit fresher, more comfortable across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. Some outbreaks of rain here, but across parts of England and Wales, we already had some heavy thunderstorms overnight, and some of them are starting to clear away towards the east. But as we head into this afternoon, I am expecting some more heavy, thundery showers to develop, particularly across central and eastern parts of England. It is still going to be hot and humid, especially in the south. Temperatures in the high 20s, possibly low 30s. A bit more comfortable further north, but perhaps a bit warmer than it was yesterday. As we go through the rest of today and across Scotland, there will be a few outbreaks of rain, perhaps across some eastern parts, but further west, a dry and maybe brighter picture to end the day. A few spots of rain perhaps for parts of Northern Ireland, and across northern England, some heavy, maybe even thundery showers are possible, particularly towards the northeast. But it's across central, eastern parts of England where we're going to have the most frequent heavy, thundery downpours as we go through the second half of today. Watch out for some large hail, some